High in the Colorado Rockies, where the peaks scrape the sky and the pine trees whisper in the wind. There are cabins untouched by time. And untouched by the living. Some say the mountains are alive. Watching those who enter the forest. Guiding them to places where cell signals cannot reach. Where the outside world cannot save them. Visitors report sudden chills. Doors that creak open on their own. And shadows moving along the walls. Some hear whispers calling their names in the dead of night. Others see figures standing silently at the edge of the clearing. Vanishing when approached. Tonight, we will journey to 25 haunted mountain cabins in Colorado. Cabins that hold dark secrets. Where isolation becomes fear. And where the mountains themselves seem to guard the restless spirits that dwell within. Take a deep breath. Because once you enter these cabins, the forest may not let you leave. Greetings, my friend. I hope tonight finds you safe. Where the lights can chase away the shadows. And your heart is ready for the stories that will creep under your skin. Colorado's mountains are breathtaking in the day, with sunlight sparkling across snow-dusted peaks, and pine forests stretching endlessly. But at night, these same mountains become a playground for fear. The mountain cabins we are about to visit are small, isolated, and often unreachable by modern technology. No cell signal. No quick escape. Just the forest, the wind, and the unknown. Some travelers hear footsteps on empty floors. Some feel icy hands brush their shoulders. Some see figures in the trees, watching silently, as though they belong to the forest, not the world of the living. Every cabin has its own story. Every shadow holds a secret. And every night brings a new chance for the past to make itself known. Before we enter these haunted mountain retreats, I have a question for you. If you were alone in a remote cabin in the mountains, with no cell signal, and a storm rolling in, would you dare to stay the night? And what would you hope or fear to see in the darkness? Share your answer in the comments, if you dare. And let us explore the shadows together tonight. Whispering Pines Cabin sits quietly deep within the dense forest of Estes Park. Surrounded by towering pines that sway in the mountain winds. By day, it appears as a tranquil retreat, the perfect hideaway for those seeking solitude and the beauty of nature. Yet as dusk falls, the cabin transforms, and the forest seems to hold its breath, thick with the weight of unseen presence. Visitors often speak of sudden drops in temperature, chills that appear without warning and linger longer than natural. The air grows heavy, and the warmth of the cabin seems to shrink, leaving a sensation of being watched. It is in these moments that the forest itself feels alive, every whisper of whine through the needles carrying secrets that have long remained hidden. At night, whispers echo outside the cabin windows. They are soft, almost indistinct, yet unmistakable to those who listen. The voices seem to speak in low tones, words half-formed and impossible to fully comprehend. They drift along the edges of the clearing, brushing against the ears of those inside, leaving a sense of unease and curiosity intertwined. Shadows move silently along the porch, stretching long and thin under the moonlight. They flicker at the edge of vision, disappearing when directly observed. Sometimes they seem to gather near the door, as if waiting, watching. The floorboards creak occasionally, though no one crosses them. Every movement is subtle yet deliberate, a presence that asserts itself without revealing form. Some visitors report seeing a pale figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It remains motionless, does not blink, does not move, and yet there is an unmistakable awareness in its gaze. When approached, it vanishes, leaving only the whisper of wind through the pines and the lingering feeling of being observed. The forest surrounding Whispering Pines Cabin amplifies every sound. The rustle of leaves, the snap of twigs. and the distant cry of an owl take on an otherworldly quality. At night, even the most familiar noises carry an unsettling echo. As if the cabin exists on the edge of two worlds, one visible and one just out of reach. Visitors who spend the night often awaken to subtle changes in their surroundings. Doors may be slightly ajar when they were closed, objects shifted ever so slightly, or the faint sound of footsteps crossing the porch. Nothing is overtly threatening, yet the evidence of another presence is undeniable. The atmosphere is thick with tension and curiosity, compelling guests to question what is real and what exists only in the mind. The cabin's interior is equally alive with mystery. Shadows pool in corners and stretch across walls under the flickering light of a single lamp. The wooden beams above seem to hum faintly, carrying with them an echo of old stories and memories that refuse to fade. The air smells faintly of pine and something more intangible, a lingering essence that is difficult to name but impossible to ignore. Even during the day, the cabin holds an aura of anticipation. Light filters through the pine branches, casting long, narrow shadows across the floors. The clearing seems to shift subtly when unobserved, creating the impression of movement just beyond vision. Those who enter feel the weight of the forest pressing in, as if every tree is leaning closer to watch, every branch whispering secrets too old to tell aloud. At night, the forest itself seems to respond to the presence within the cabin. Winds rise and fall without warning, carrying the distant howl of unseen creatures. Shadows lengthen unnaturally, folding over one another and creating shapes that defy logic. The figure at the clearing's edge, when it appears, seems connected to the rhythm of the forest, moving with the subtle pulse of wind and shadow, a guardian of the space between reality and the unseen. For some, the experience is one of quiet fascination, an eerie beauty that intertwines fear and awe. For others, it is a confrontation with the inexplicable, a reminder that the natural world carries mysteries that cannot be fully understood. Each step through the cabin, each glance toward the porch or the edge of the clearing, becomes part of an unfolding narrative that is both immersive and unsettling. Those who leave Whispering Pines cabin rarely forget the sensations they encounter. The cold that lingers on the skin. The whispers that echo long after the ears no longer hear. And the shadowy presence that seems to trail their thoughts. The forest remains, unchanged in appearance, yet charged with the knowledge of what has passed within and around the cabin. In Estes Park, the cabin stands as more than a retreat, it is a threshold. It is a place where the past, the unseen, and the present converge. Shadows move where eyes cannot follow, whispers speak in silence. And figures appear that may never be fully understood. The experience of Whispering Pines cabin is one of subtle terror and quiet wonder. A story written in the chill of the air. The creak of the floorboards. And the fleeting glimpse of the pale figure at the edge of the clearing. Every visitor carries a piece of the cabin with them, a memory of shadows and whispers, of silent observation and sudden chills. The forest and the cabin hold their secrets tightly, revealing only what they choose, leaving the brave and curious to wonder what lies just beyond the edge of perception. Whispering Pines cabin remains a place where the unseen is never far away, where the forest itself watches, and where the night carries stories that are waiting for those who dare to listen. Dark Hollow Retreat sits tucked deep within the forests of Boulder County, isolated from the world and shrouded in the dense shadows of towering pines. The path to the cabin winds through narrow trails, where sunlight struggles to reach the forest floor, and the air carries a chill even in summer months. Travelers often remark on the weight of the silence, a quiet that presses against the skin and fills the mind with anticipation. Guests at the retreat frequently report the sensation of being watched. It begins subtly, a glance toward a window or the edges of the clearing, feeling eyes tracing their every move. The sensation is not constant, but it comes in waves, sudden and disorienting, as if the forest itself is alive with unseen presence. Footsteps echo along the cabin floors when no one else is present. Wood creaks under invisible weight, shifting in patterns that mimic human movement. The sounds are deliberate yet elusive, coming from the corners of rooms where no one stands. Visitors pause mid-step, straining to locate the source, only to find the space empty, the air still, the only sound the quiet hum of the forest outside. At night, the fireplace sometimes lights itself, flames dancing without origin. Sparks flicker, casting shadows that stretch across the walls, distorting familiar shapes into forms that seem almost alive. The warmth of the fire contrasts with the coolness that fills the rest of the cabin, creating a dissonance that feels deliberate, as if the retreat itself holds a memory it is willing to share only in fragments. Some have seen a figure in black disappearing into the woods behind the cabin. It moves silently, gliding between the trees, and vanishes before it can be approached. The figure appears without warning, often at the periphery of vision, and leaves behind a lingering sense of presence, a subtle unease that persists long after it disappears. The interior of the cabin enhances the sensation of the uncanny. Shadows pool in corners, stretching and twisting in the flicker of candlelight or the occasional fire. Doors that were closed moments ago are sometimes found ajar, and objects shift subtly, moved from their previous places as if guided by invisible hands. Even the furniture seems to take on a life of its own, creaking in response to unseen footsteps or sudden movements of air. Outside, the surrounding forest amplifies the retreat's atmosphere. Moonlight filters through the branches, illuminating patches of the trail with silver light, while leaving other areas in deep darkness. The rustle of leaves and the distant calls of nocturnal creatures mingle with softer, unidentifiable sounds. Whispers carried on the wind are sometimes mistaken for voices, fleeting and elusive, impossible to locate or interpret. Visitors often describe a tension in the air, a quiet expectation that something will occur. The feeling is subtle at first, manifesting as goosebumps or a slight tightening in the chest. Over time, it grows, a layering of anticipation and uncertainty that colors every step and glance. The retreat itself seems to respond to those who enter, shifting subtly to heighten awareness and draw attention to what is unseen. The figure in black appears with varying frequency. Sometimes it materializes closer to the cabin, glancing briefly at windows or doors, before retreating into the shadows. Its presence is never threatening, but it is unnerving, a reminder of the forest's depth and the cabin's history. The fireplace becomes a focal point during nighttime stays. Flames erupt spontaneously, the warmth radiating into rooms where no one has stirred. Shadows cast by the fire seem to move independently, merging with the darkness outside the windows. The play of light and shadow transforms the interior, creating shapes that vanish when approached, leaving behind the impression of lives lived long ago, echoes of moments now unseen. Throughout the retreat, the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Simple sounds, a floorboard creaking, the wind against the walls, a door shifting, take on new significance. Every movement, every flicker of light, seems charged with intent, part of a larger narrative that visitors sense but cannot fully decipher. The interplay of natural and unseen elements creates an experience that is immersive, compelling, and hauntingly beautiful. The hiker's face contorts in a mixture of awe and terror. The interplay of natural and unseen elements creates an experience that is immersive, compelling, and hauntingly beautiful. Even in daylight, the retreat retains an aura of mystery. Shadows linger longer than they should. Corners remain darker than natural light would suggest. And the forest feels alert, watching every movement. The sensation of being observed persists, subtle and constant. A reminder that the cabin is not simply a place to stay, but a space imbued with memory and presence. Guests often leave with a sense of quiet reverence. The retreat's haunting is not violent or aggressive, but patient and watchful. The echoes of footsteps combine to create a layered experience. The spontaneous fires, and the fleeting figure in black combine to create a layered experience. One that engages all senses and lingers in the mind long after departure. Dark Hollow Retreat stands as a testament to the power of place and memory. It is a site where history, atmosphere, and subtle supernatural phenomena converge. Each visit is a journey into the unknown, a crossing into a space where the ordinary is transformed, and the unseen is felt as vividly as the tangible. The forest, the cabin, and the shadows together create a world that is immersive and evocative. Guests are invited not just to witness, but to experience the retreat. To feel the layers of presence that saturate the air. Footsteps echo, flames ignite without origin. And the figure in black drifts silently. A reminder that some places are alive with history, memory, and the unseen. And that in such places, every moment is charged with quiet mystery. Visitors leave the retreat changed, carrying with them the memory of a place that watches and listens. Dark Hollow Retreat is not merely a cabin in the woods. It is a living environment where the natural and supernatural coexist. Where shadows and whispers shape perception. And where the forest itself seems to hold its secrets close. Revealing them only to those willing to observe, listen, and feel. Eagle Peak Cabin sits alone on a ridge, surrounded by towering evergreens and jagged rock faces. The isolation is immediate, felt in the stillness of the air and the expanse of the valley below. The sun casts long shadows across the slopes, yet even in daylight there is a sense that the ridge has secrets it does not share. The ridge has secrets it does not share. As night falls, the temperature drops sharply. Visitors often describe a sudden cold that seems to seep through clothing and cling to the skin. Arms brushed by icy touches evoke a presence that is unseen but undeniably felt. The sensation is fleeting yet persistent, leaving a trace of unease that lingers long after it passes. Windows frame the darkened landscape, and in the quiet moments, figures appear briefly outside. They are shadowy and indistinct, moving in ways that defy explanation. Sometimes they vanish the instant they are noticed, leaving nothing but the faint impression of form and movement. The fleeting visions make the ridge feel alive, as if the cabin itself watches over its occupants. Chains dragging across the porch are reported late at night, their sound echoing. Their sound echoing across the ridge. The noise is metallic and deliberate, impossible to attribute to the wind or wildlife. It begins softly, a subtle scraping, then grows with rhythm, as if unseen hands move across the boards. Each echo amplifies the isolation of the cabin, emphasizing the distance from the nearest neighbor and the vast wilderness surrounding it. The cabin's architecture enhances the sense of suspense. Each creak of floorboards is magnified in the silence. A subtle but constant reminder that the space responds to every step and movement. Even ordinary sounds take on significance in this heightened atmosphere. Outside, the ridge is cloaked in darkness, with only moonlight and starlight providing dim illumination. Trees sway in the wind, casting moving shadows across the porch and windows. Every gust brings the possibility of movement, and every shadow could conceal something more than natural elements. The boundary between the real and the imagined is blurred, allowing the mind to sense presences that may not be entirely of this world. Visitors often feel a weight pressing in the stillness of night. The isolation of the cabin contributes to this sensation. As does the unbroken quiet of the high ridge. Even in the presence of companions, the feeling of being watched remains. A subtle but persistent awareness that something unseen observes every action and every pause. The forest surrounding the cabin adds layers to the experience. Pine needles crunch underfoot, the branches sway with the wind. The branches sway with the wind, and the occasional rustle suggests life beyond what can be seen. Shadows move between trees, sometimes forming shapes that appear humanoid. The combination of natural sounds and unexplained movement creates an atmosphere charged with anticipation and tension. Light behaves unusually around Eagle Peak Cabin. Windows reflect more than the interior, sometimes showing figures and reflections that do not correspond to anyone inside. Flickers of movement and shapes in the glass amplify the feeling that the cabin is more than a structure. It is a point where presence, perception, and environment converge to create a layered and immersive experience. Visitors often report a lingering feeling after leaving the cabin. The ridge, the cold touches, the brief figures, and the sounds of chains all leave an imprint. Memories of the place are vivid and detailed, colored by the sensations experienced during the night. The cabin becomes more than a location, it becomes a narrative in the minds of those who cross its threshold. The isolation of Eagle Peak Cabin forces attention to small details. A board creaking, a shadow passing by a window, or a chill in the air is impossible to ignore. Each element of the environment contributes to the story of the cabin, turning ordinary moments into encounters that feel both personal and profound. The ridge itself seems to participate, shaping the experience for anyone who visits. The cabin at Eagle Peak reminds visitors that solitude can amplify perception. In the absence of distractions, the environment, the structure, and unseen presences become central to the experience. The sensation of being observed, the fleeting figures outside windows, and the sounds across the porch create a narrative that is felt as much as it is seen. Eagle Peak Cabin is a place where nature, isolation, and history converge. The ridge holds a quiet intensity, and the cabin amplifies every sound, shadow, and movement. Visitors find themselves attentive to the smallest details, aware of every brush of air and shift of light. Each night becomes a study in presence, perception, and the subtle interplay between the physical and the unseen. The ridge endures beyond individual visits. Chains may continue to scrape across the porch. Shadows may still move past windows. And icy touches may linger in memory. The cabin remains a threshold. A location where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexist. Those who visit carry the experience with them. An encounter with isolation, atmosphere, and the unseen. That remains long after the ridge falls behind them. Eagle Peak Cabin is not merely a structure on a ridge. It is a living narrative of space, sensation, and subtle haunting. Figures in the darkness, cold touches, and the sound of chains dragging create an immersive experience that engages mind and body. Every visitor leaves with a story shaped by perception, environment, and the quiet, persistent presence that defines the cabin on Eagle Peak. The Timberline Lodge Cabin stands quietly in the dense forests of Routt County, its weathered wooden walls holding decades of stories, some spoken, many left unrecorded. By day, the cabin appears as a rustic retreat, a place where sunlight dances through the surrounding pines and snow drifts gently along the roof in winter. But as night falls, the atmosphere changes, thickening with tension, history, and the unseen. Visitors approaching the cabin often speak of an uneasy stillness, a pause in the natural rhythm of the forest. The wind carries a chill, even on nights that are otherwise mild. And shadows lengthen in ways that seem deliberate, forming shapes just at the edges of perception. The doorway, worn and weathered by years of use, sometimes frames figures that vanish the moment they are looked at directly. These apparitions are fleeting, indistinct, yet unmistakably human in form. Inside, the cabin retains the scent of aged timber and old fires. A comforting aroma that contrasts sharply with the unsettling phenomena reported by those who enter. Faint voices sometimes call the names of visitors, soft and persistent, drifting through the living room and into the bedrooms. The sounds are subtle at first, like a whisper in the wind, but they can grow insistent, echoing through the empty spaces as if someone unseen is attempting to communicate. The kitchen, often the heart of the cabin, exhibits its own peculiar behavior. Objects move without explanation, as though invisible hands are rearranging utensils and crockery. Chairs may tilt slightly, doors shift ajar, and the faintest impression of a presence can be felt behind a visitor, leaving a cold brush along the shoulder or neck. These movements are never violent, but they leave a lingering awareness that the space is occupied by more than the living. The history of the Timberline Lodge cabin adds weight to these experiences. Over the years, reports of disappearances and unaccounted-for visitors have woven themselves into local lore. Each story contributes to the cabin's reputation, creating an atmosphere where even the smallest creak or shadow seems charged with meaning. The combination of history and environment transforms the rustic retreat into a place of anticipation and unease. Visitors describe the interior as a mix of warmth and tension. The soft glow from old lamps illuminates wooden beams and creaking floors, while shadows gather in corners, shifting as though observing. Every footstep is measured, every glance cast across the room heightened by a sense that the past is present, waiting quietly to reveal itself. The feeling is both intimate and unnerving, a delicate balance between curiosity and caution. Nighttime amplifies the cabina's unusual character. The forest outside becomes a wall of darkness, broken only by the occasional glimmer of starlight or distant moon. Sounds travel differently in the still air. The faint scrape of a chair or the tapping of a branch on a window can seem closer, sharper, and more deliberate. Some visitors report hearing footsteps on the floor above, though no one is staying in the upstairs rooms. The combination of silence, sound, and shadow creates an atmosphere charged with expectation. Approaching the doorway can be an unsettling experience in itself. Figures may appear in the frame, standing silently as if waiting, only to vanish when confronted. The effect is disorienting, a fleeting encounter that challenges perception and leaves a lingering sense of presence. Even the act of entering the cabin becomes more than a simple movementa, it becomes an exploration of memory, history, and the unknown. The cabina's objects seem to hold memory as well. Utensils, chairs, and doors react subtly to movement, shifting in ways that suggest interaction with invisible occupants. These occurrences are never violent or threatening. Yet they reinforce the feeling that the cabin exists in two layers, one visible and one unseen. Visitors become participants in a narrative that unfolds quietly around them. A story shaped by shadow, sound, and space. In quieter moments, the voices call softly again, indistinct but human in tone. Some describe them as familiar, as if echoing from a distant past, while others hear them as strange and alien, just beyond understanding. These sounds weave through the cabin like a thread, connecting all who enter, linking present visitors with those who have passed before. The Timberline Lodge cabin is not a place of sudden terror. Its influence is subtle, a persistent and patient presence that invites awareness and reflection. Each room, each shadow, and each whisper contributes to a sense of history that is alive and tangible. Visitors often leave with more questions than answers, carrying the memory of a space that feels both inhabited and haunted. Walking through the cabin is an exercise in perception. Figures appear and vanish, voices rise and fall. Every movement is imbued with meaning, every glance across a room becomes a careful observation of the seen and unseen, and the combination of environmental cues and historical resonance makes the cabin a living narrative, unfolding differently for each person who crosses its threshold. By the time visitors step back into the forest, the night seems heavier, the shadows longer, and the wind carrying more than just leaves. The night seems heavier, the shadows longer, and the wind carrying more than just leaves. The ordinary and extraordinary coexist, where history and mystery walk hand in hand. Its presence is subtle, but unforgettable, leaving an impression that remains long after the door has closed and the forest has swallowed the path behind. The cabin stands as a testament to the unseen and the unknown. Its walls hold stories of the past. Its floors echo with movements unobserved. And its spaces remain alive with quiet energy. Every visitor becomes part of its ongoing tale. A chapter in a story written in shadow, sound, and memory. The Timberline Lodge cabin waits silently, offering its presence to those willing to cross its threshold and witness the delicate interplay between the living and the spectral. Pine Shadow Cabin sits deep within the dense forests of Larimer County, where the pines rise tall and the air holds the scent of earth and resin. By day, it appears as a peaceful retreat, a secluded haven for hikers and travelers seeking solitude. But when night falls, the forest changes. Shadows stretch long across the clearing. And the stillness is broken only by the rustle of leaves and the occasional call of an owl. Visitors often hear footsteps crunching on the forest floor outside, soft at first, then growing closer, though no one is in sight. The sound is deliberate and measured, as if some Ania or some Thinga is pacing the edge of the clearing, keeping watch. Even the wind seems to carry a consciousness here, weaving between the trees and whispering through the cabina's wooden walls. A ghostly figure has been seen standing among the trees, pale and silent. It moves with purpose, appearing in one spot and vanishing without warning. Some who have glimpsed it describe a feeling of being observed, an awareness that lingers long after the figure disappears. It is never threatening, yet impossible to ignore. The forest itself seems to bend around it, as though nature recognizes its presence and makes way. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is heavy with the remnants of unseen activity. Visitors report hearing children laughing in rooms that are empty. A soft and fleeting sound that seems to circle the space before vanishing into silence. The laughter is light yet eerie, carrying the weight of memories that have long been forgotten. Objects in the cabin sometimes shift subtly. The air grows colder in these moments. And the silence of the forest outside contrasts sharply with the restless energy within. The forest surrounding Pine Shadow Cabin amplifies every sound. The snap of a twig. The rustle of needles. Or the distant cry of a nocturnal animal. Takes on an otherworldly quality at night. Footsteps that echo outside seem too rhythmic to be random. And shadows that flicker among the trees suggest forms just beyond the edge of perception. Visitors find themselves listening intently, unsure if the noises are natural or something far older and unseen. The cabin windows reflect more than the forest. Some visitors see fleeting glimpses of figures in the glass. Shapes that vanish when approached. A shadow crosses the room behind them. Or a fleeting image appears in the corner of the eye. Only to disappear when directly observed. It is as if the forest itself projects these visions. Blending memory, history and spectral presence into a tapestry that surrounds every guest. Even in the daylight, Pine Shadow Cabin retains an aura of mystery. The forest seems aware of every movement, every step taken along the winding path that leads to the cabin. And it reacts subtly, as if guarding the secrets within its shadows. At night, the forest and the cabin are alive with stories that cannot be told aloud. Shadows stretch and twist, whispering through the pines and across the floorboards. The pale figure among the trees watches silently, a guardian or observer of the human presence. The laughter of unseen children drifts along the walls, mingling with the natural sounds of the forest to create a hauntingly beautiful and unsettling symphony. Each visitor experiences Pine Shadow Cabin differently. Some feel only a subtle sense of unease, a chill that rises without reason. Others encounter the figures, hear the laughter, or feel the unseen presence brushing past them in the dark. All leave with an awareness that this forest and this cabin exist on the threshold of two worlds, where the living brush against echoes of the past. The legend of Pine Shadow Cabin is not one of violence or terror. It is a story of lingering presence, of memory etched into the forest and the cabin itself. The figures, the whispers, and the laughter are fragments of a time that persists in the shadows, waiting for those who enter to acknowledge it. To walk here at night is to step into a space where the forest breathes with life beyond the ordinary. Where every shadow may hold a story, and every sound carries a memory. As visitors leave the cabin and follow the winding paths back to the main road, the footsteps fade, the shadows retreat, and the laughter dissolves into the wind. Yet the sense of being observed remains, a reminder that Pine Shadow Cabin is more than a place. It is a living memory, a space where the unseen and the known meet. And where the quiet forest holds its secrets, waiting patiently for the next traveler brave enough to listen and watch. Frostbite Hollow sits deep in the mountains of Gunnison County, a cabin isolated by snow and surrounded by towering evergreens. In winter, the roads vanish beneath drifts, leaving the cabin alone in a world of white, where the wind howls like voices carried from a distant time. During blizzards, figures have been seen at the cabin windows. Shadows move behind frosted panes, appearing and vanishing as snow swirls through the air. They do not knock or call. Their presence is quiet but undeniable, a glimpse of something not entirely of this world, lingering in the corners of vision before fading into the whiteout beyond. Soft knocks on locked doors disturb the stillness inside. Visitors report hearing them late at night, a gentle rapping that does not follow a pattern, sometimes coming in pairs, sometimes single. Each knock carries weight, the sound sharp against the muffled roar of wind and snow, impossible to ignore yet impossible to trace. When the doors are checked, no one stands outside, only the endless drifts of snow pressing against the wood. Some guests have felt icy hands brushing their faces as they sleep. The sensation is fleeting, cold as the winter wind, leaving a trace of chill that seeps into the skin. It is never violent, but intimate, as if the hollow itself reaches out to remind those within that they are not alone. Each encounter leaves a lingering awareness, a heightened sense of the cabina's presence and the stories it holds within its walls. Inside, the cabin is both warm and unwelcoming. The fire crackles, sending flickers of light across walls lined with simple timber. Shadows bend and twist in the glow, merging with the darkness of corners where the eye struggles to perceive. Objects shift slightly, chairs angled differently than before, a cup moved across the table, subtle changes that create a feeling of life within the stillness. The snow outside amplifies the isolation. Blizzard winds whip through the trees, creating shapes and sounds that seem almost human. Footsteps crunch on the roof or the porch, though no one is there. The world outside is transformed into a living white expanse, filled with movement that may be imagined, but the hollow seems to respond to every sound, every stir within its walls. The figures at the windows often appear during moments of stillness, when the storm is at its heaviest and the light from the fire flickers against the frost. They are silent observers, watching the interior without acknowledgement, their outlines shifting like smoke in the wind. Guests describe a sensation of being studied, as if the cabin itself holds memories it allows only a select few to glimpse. Nightfall brings the most vivid encounters. The wind howls through unseen cracks, carrying distant echoes of voices that cannot be traced. The knocks on the doors grow sharper, and the shadows lengthen, stretching across walls and floors with an intensity that makes the familiar unfamiliar. Every creak, every gust of wind becomes meaningful, a language only the hollow speaks fluently. The icy touches at night are never threatening, but they leave a lasting impression. They brush faces, hands, and shoulders, creating the sense that the cabin is alive and aware. It is a place where history, nature, and the unseen converge into an experience that is immersive, haunting, and unforgettable. The interior warmth of the cabin contrasts sharply with the relentless cold outside. Snow piles against the windows and doors, yet inside, shadows move freely. And unseen presences make themselves known. Guests often describe a feeling of being simultaneously comforted and observed. A delicate balance between safety and unease that defines the Hollow's strange charm. Every visitor leaves with the memory of the Hollow's silence and its whispers. The figures at the windows, the knocks on doors, and the fleeting icy touches become part of the story each person carries away. Frostbite Hollow is more than a cabin in the mountains. It is a space alive with presence, a witness to time, and a reminder that even in the most isolated places, unseen lives may linger, leaving traces for those who enter to feel, to notice, and to remember. The snowbound landscape ensures that every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light is heightened. The wind, the trees, and the snowfall become collaborators in the Hollow's haunting, blending natural and supernatural elements into an atmosphere both beautiful and unsettling. Each storm brings a new encounter, and each visitor experiences the Hollow in a way uniquely their own. Frostbite Hollow remains a place where reality and mystery meet. The figures, the knocks, and the touches are not mere illusions but integral parts of the cabina's identity. It is a location that draws the curious, the brave, and those willing to accept the forest, the cold, and the unknown as part of the experience. Every moment in the Hollow is charged with presence, a living memory of winter, solitude, and the unseen that lingers in the mind long after the snow has melted. The cabina's story is written in shadows and frost, in cold hands and quiet knocks. Frostbite Hollow is an invitation to witness a world where isolation and the supernatural intertwine. Where each visitor steps into a living scene shaped by snow, silence, and the lingering spirits of the mountains. Here, the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary, and every moment is infused with the quiet power of the unknown. Red Oak Cabin stands quietly among the dense pines of Clear Creek County. Its wooden exterior is weathered by time and the harsh mountain winds, giving it a sense of enduring solitude. The surrounding forest sways gently, and the rustling of branches creates a constant, almost hypnotic background noise that fills the air. The cabin appears ordinary at first glance, yet visitors quickly sense there is more than meets the eye. As night falls, the atmosphere changes. Guests have reported seeing silhouettes on the roof. They appear briefly and vanish as quickly as they emerge, leaving only the shadow of their passage and a subtle feeling that the cabin itself is alive. The roof seems to hold these presences as if they are guardians of the structure, watching from above while the world sleeps. Inside, the cabin carries a different energy. The empty kitchen often becomes a stage for inexplicable phenomena. Whispers drift across the room, faint and indistinct, as though the walls themselves are speaking. The sound is soft, barely audible, yet unmistakable. It seems to come from nowhere and everywhere at once, causing visitors to pause and listen, aware of the unseen but tangible presence around them. The living room is no less active. Shadowy figures drift silently across the floorboards and between pieces of furniture. When one turns to focus, they are gone, leaving the space seemingly untouched, yet imbued with a sensation of movement and awareness. The cabin reacts subtly to these presences, creaking floorboards or shifting the temperature, as though acknowledging the passage of unseen guests. A dramatic drop in temperature often accompanies the appearance of these apparitions. The air becomes cold and heavy, creating a contrast with the warmth of the cabin's hearth and the surrounding forest. Visitors shiver as they move through the rooms, sensing an invisible chill that clings to their skin. The effect is immediate and profound, as if the cabin's history and its unseen occupants reach across time to make themselves known. The windows of Red Oak Cabin frame the darkened forest beyond. Shadows move between the trees, sometimes appearing to connect with the figures inside. The interplay between the interior and exterior creates a layered atmosphere, where the line between what is natural and what is supernatural blurs. Each glance outside can reveal a fleeting silhouette, a shifting shadow, or a momentary reflection that adds to the sense of mystery. Every sound within the cabin is amplified by its isolation. A creaking beam, the whisper of wind through the chimney, or the soft fall of an object becomes significant in the quiet night. Visitors describe an acute awareness of these details, as though every noise carries meaning. The cabin seems attuned to the attention it receives, responding to the presence of the living with subtle movements, fleeting figures, and whispers that linger just out of reach. Red Oak Cabin's history adds depth to its enigmatic character. Though records are sparse, the stories passed down speak of past occupants and long-forgotten events. Each report of a shadow or a whisper feels connected to a deeper narrative. An accumulation of experiences that imbue the cabin with both charm and unease. Visitors sense that they are entering a space layered with memory and presence, where time overlaps and the past is never truly gone. The cabina's isolation amplifies every encounter. With no neighbors nearby, the forest becomes part of the experience, its sounds and movements blending with the cabina's internal phenomena. The rustling of pine needles, the distant call of an owl, and the swaying branches all merge with whispers and shadows, creating a cohesive and immersive atmosphere. Guests often feel as though they are part of something larger, a story unfolding in real time that cannot be fully understood or explained. Lighting within Red Oak Cabin contributes to its spectral qualities. Lanterns and the fireplace cast flickering shadows that shift unpredictably across the walls and floor. Every flame seems to animate the space, highlighting movements that may be ordinary or may be extraordinary. The interplay of light and shadow encourages the imagination to see patterns, forms, and figures that emerge briefly before dissolving back into darkness. This awareness is subtle yet persistent, a feeling that unseen eyes track movement throughout the cabin. As though the cabin itself is conscious of each step, each breath, and each pause. Each influencing the perception of the other. Red Oak Cabin leaves a lasting impression. The silhouettes on the roof. The whispers in the kitchen. The drifting shadows and the sudden chill. Create an experience that is both thrilling and unsettling. The cabina's presence lingers long after visitors depart. Embedded in memory and sensation. Its combination of isolation, history, and spectral activity ensures that every visit becomes a story. A personal encounter with the mysterious and the unseen. Every night at Red Oak Cabin is a study in atmosphere, perception, and the interaction between environment and presence. Figures that appear and vanish, whispers that float without source, and the tangible cold that fills the rooms. Make the cabin a living entity in its own right. Visitors come seeking solitude or adventure and leave carrying an experience shaped by mystery, subtle terror, and an enduring sense of wonder. Red Oak Cabin remains a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexist. Its walls hold echoes of past lives. Its floors bear the memory of unseen movements. And its roof shelters silhouettes that glide silently in the moonlight. Every visit is a journey through shadow, sound, and sensation. Leaving an indelible mark on those who enter. And ensuring that the cabin's spectral charm endures through time. The broken timber cabin sits deep within the thick forests of Jackson County, its weathered timbers blending into the surrounding trees. By day, it is a quiet, forgotten structure, a remnant of a past long gone. Moss climbs along its walls and the roof sags under the weight of countless winters. The forest hums softly around it, a living barrier that seems to protect the cabin while keeping it isolated from the modern world. Visitors who approach the cabin often notice a change in the air, a subtle shift that sets the senses on edge. The rustling leaves and distant birdsong giving way to a stillness that feels deliberate, expectant. The deck, weathered and splintered, often creaks under steps, though many report hearing footsteps when no one is present. These sounds are uneven, sometimes quick, sometimes slow, as if someone unseen is pacing or wandering across the boards. The doorway, framed by darkened wood, has been the site of countless sightings. Figures appear in the threshold, sometimes indistinct shadows, sometimes fully formed shapes. Only to vanish instantly when approached. leaving those who witness it with a sense of unease and wonder. The forest seems to hold its breath, as if waiting for the observer to step closer and join the silent narrative that has unfolded for decades. The wind that moves through the trees carries more than the scent of pine and earth. It brings with it soft whispers, almost imperceptible at first, but insistent enough to catch attention. Names are spoken, old and forgotten, drifting on the currents as if the forest itself remembers those who have walked its paths before. Each whisper seems layered, a chorus of voices from a past interwoven with the present, carrying stories that will never be fully understood. Inside the cabin, the air is heavy with history. A chair may tilt slightly, a door might shift just enough to catch the edge of perception. These occurrences are quiet and measured, leaving a lingering impression of being observed. Shadows move along walls and corners, fleeting and elusive, shaping themselves around the flicker of light that filters through cracked windows. Night amplifies the cabina's peculiar energy. The forest outside becomes a wall of darkness, broken only by the occasional moonbeam or the distant glow of stars. Every sound is heightened, from the snap of a twig to the whisper of the wind. Footsteps echo differently across the deck, sometimes seeming closer, sometimes retreating into the distance. Figures that appear in the doorway become more pronounced, yet vanish the moment attention is focused upon them, leaving only the memory of presence. Visitors often describe a sensation of being followed, not by a living observer, but by something that exists on the edge of perception. Cold drafts move through the rooms, brushing shoulders or tracing the nape of the neck. The effect is subtle but unmistakable, a tactile reminder that the cabin is shared with entities that do not belong to the world of the living. These experiences leave a lasting impression, blending fear with fascination in equal measure. The cabina's isolation contributes to its enduring mystery. With no nearby roads or human activity, it exists as a relic frozen in time. Those who approach must navigate the forest carefully, guided only by faint paths and intuition. The journey itself becomes part of the experience, the forest acting as a threshold between the ordinary and the extraordinary. By the time visitors reach the cabin, they are already attuned to the subtle shifts in air, sound, and shadow that define the space. Within the walls of the broken timber cabin, the past is palpable. Every creaking floorboard, every whispered name, and every fleeting shadow is a connection to a history that is simultaneously intimate and unknowable. Visitors become participants in a narrative that unfolds quietly around them, a story shaped by presence, memory, and the passage of time. The cabin does not demand attention, but it rewards awareness, revealing itself slowly to those willing to observe. Even in the open spaces surrounding the cabin, the forest seems alive with remnants of history. The interplay between forest and cabin creates a tension that is both subtle and persistent, a continuous reminder of the unseen forces that inhabit the area. The broken timber cabin is not a place of sudden terror, but rather of quiet presence. Offering a connection to the unseen, while maintaining the calm of its natural surroundings. Visitors leave with the sense of having witnessed something beyond explanation. A fleeting glimpse into a world that exists alongside their own. As travelers step back into the forest and return to the paths leading out of Jackson County, the memory of the cabin lingers. The creaking deck, the doorway figures, the whispered names, and the cold traces of invisible movement remain with them. The broken timber cabin is more than a structure, it is a vessel of memory, presence, and mystery. Standing silently in the forest, waiting for those who dare to walk its threshold and experience the delicate balance between the living and the unseen. The forest grows quiet once more, reclaiming the cabin in shadow and moonlight. The broken timber cabin remains, a testament to the lingering presence of what cannot be fully understood, offering an invitation to all who come near to witness its spectral story. Misty Hollow Cabin sits alone in the highlands of Eagle County, surrounded by towering evergreens and steep slopes. At sunrise, the fog drifts through the valleys, soft and quiet, giving the cabin an air of seclusion. By day, the mist seems gentle, almost protective, wrapping the cabin in a veil of calm. But as evening approaches, the atmosphere shifts. Shadows lengthen, the fog thickens, and the air carries a sense of anticipation, as if the forest itself is holding its breath. Visitors often describe figures moving silently in the mist. They appear at the edge of the tree line, pale and fleeting, gliding without sound. The shapes are difficult to focus on, as if the fog blurs their edges intentionally. Some see them standing still, watching, before dissolving back into the gray haze. Others glimpse movement out of the corner of the eye, only to turn and find nothing there, the forest still and empty. Laughter and crying echo through the woods near the cabin. These sounds are faint, sometimes close, sometimes distant, and always inexplicably human. A visitor walking along a fog-covered path may hear the soft weeping of someone unseen. The sounds fade as quickly as they arrive, leaving only the mist and the echo of what might have been a memory of another time. There are moments when the air feels thick with presence. Guests report feeling fingers brush their arms, a light touch that is not threatening but undeniably real. The sensation appears randomly, sometimes while standing in the cabin doorway, sometimes while walking among the trees. Each instance leaves a lingering chill, a reminder that Misty Hollow is more than it seems. The fog seems to carry these touches, moving with unseen intention through the forest and over the cabin. The cabin itself holds an aura of quiet mystery. The windows reflect the fog outside, and occasionally, the silhouettes of figures appear in the glass. Doors may shift slightly on their hinges, chairs appear slightly moved, and objects in the cabin seem arranged by hands that are invisible, leaving visitors to wonder what remains when no one else is near. The surrounding forest amplifies every sound, every movement. The whisper of wind through pine needles becomes a voice, a branch snapping underfoot becomes a warning. And the distant howl of an animal blends seamlessly with the ghostly cries and laughter. Even the fog itself seems alive, curling and swirling as if guiding or observing those who venture near. Walking the paths at night, visitors feel a constant presence, something moving just beyond the reach of the eyes. Even the fog itself seems alive, curling and swirling as if guiding or observing those who venture near. Some who have stayed overnight recount glimpses of figures standing silently among the trees, watching the cabin. They remain still, pale in the gray of the fog, never stepping forward, never speaking. Their presence is calm yet unnerving, as if they are part of the forest, guardians of memories long forgotten. The combination of fog, forest, and cabin creates a place where time seems suspended, where the living brush against echoes of the past. Misty Hollow is not a place of violence or malice. It is a space where emotions once felt remain imprinted in the air and the earth. Every shadow, every sound, every movement of fog carries a fragment of memory. Visitors often leave with a sense of awe and unease, the forest and cabin leaving impressions that cannot easily be shaken. The fog seems to follow them for a time, a gentle reminder that Misty Hollow holds its secrets tightly, yet invites those who are willing to listen. The night deepens, and the fog swells, hiding paths and shaping the familiar into something strange. Shadows drift across the clearing, and the echo of laughter and crying continues, weaving through the pines. The cabin stands as a solitary witness, quiet yet filled with unseen life. Figures move in and out of the mist, brushing past the trees, along the cabin walls, and across the clearing. Each encounter is fleeting, leaving a trace that is felt more than seen. As dawn approaches, the mist begins to thin. And the sounds fade, the figures disappear. And the forest seems to exhale after a long night of vigilance. Visitors step back onto the paths leading away from Misty Hollow cabin, carrying with them the memory of a place where the fog conceals more than trees, where the air itself feels alive. and where the past lingers just beyond perception. To walk the grounds of Misty Hollow is to step into a threshold where the living and the unseen coexist. The laughter, the cries, the brushes of invisible fingers, and the spectral shapes all create a tapestry of presence that lingers in the mind long after leaving. Here, in Eagle County, the forest and fog are never empty. They are alive with memory, mystery, and the quiet whispers of a world that exists alongside our own. Shadow Creek Cabin sits tucked into the trees of Summit County, its wooden frame blending with the surrounding evergreens and the gentle murmurs of the creek that runs beside it. The cabin is simple, isolated, and quiet, yet those who stay find that silence carries a weight beyond the natural stillness of the forest. At night, strange reflections appear in the windows. Faces emerge in the glass, eyes catching the dim light from within. But when approached, the faces vanish as if they were never there. Guests describe a sensation of being watched, an awareness that someone or something observes even when no one is visible. The reflections seem alive, fleeting, and impossible to capture, leaving an echo of unease that lingers long after the moment has passed. Inside, whispers move through the rooms. They are soft, nearly imperceptible at first, carried along hallways and corners, brushing against the senses without a source. Guests report hearing fragments of conversation, a sigh, or the murmur of someone unseen. The sound shifts with the movement of wind or footsteps, blending the natural with the unnatural, leaving an impression that the cabin itself holds memory and presence beyond what is tangible. Figures are often seen by the creek at night. They stand silently, motionless, their forms outlined against the reflection of moonlight on water. Some are tall, others indistinct, all quiet. As guests approach, the figures fade, dissolving into shadows and mist. The creek seems to mirror their presence, ripples in the water reflecting shapes that vanish the moment one tries to look directly at them. Each encounter leaves a lingering awareness, a sense that the edge of the creek is a threshold where the natural world and the unseen converge. The cabin itself adds to the atmosphere. Doors shift slightly on their hinges without being touched. Shadows bend in corners and along walls, stretching in ways that defy the movement of light. Every element of the cabin seems charged, as though the structure itself is alive, reacting to the presence of those within it, guiding experiences toward the uncanny. Visitors often notice changes in temperature. A sudden chill may pass through a room, or an inexplicable warmth fills a space. As if the cabin breathes along with its guests. Windows fog from condensation, yet impressions appear on the glass as though someone stands close outside. The combination of temperature shifts, shadows, and sound creates an immersive atmosphere. A feeling of being surrounded by history, memory, and unseen witnesses. The creek adds its own voice to the haunting. Water flows steadily, yet in the dead of night, the ripples seem to respond to more than wind or stone. Moonlight on the water reflects forms that move with purpose, sometimes darting along the banks, sometimes standing still, observing. The sound of water becomes a medium for echoes, a channel for whispers that might be carried from the trees or from another realm entirely. Even during daylight, the cabin retains its eerie qualities. Shadows move differently in the sunlight, reflections appear in windows at angles that seem impossible. And the creek still reveals glimpses of figures before they vanish. Visitors report a sense of anticipation, as if the cabin waits for nightfall to fully reveal the world it holds just out of reach of ordinary perception. Guests describe the feeling of being followed, not in a threatening way, but as if the space itself is aware of movement and intent. Steps taken inside the cabin echo beyond expectation. Objects appear in different positions, as if guided by unseen hands. Each subtle shift reinforces the sense that Shadow Creek Cabin is alive, its presence both gentle and unsettling. Many who stay feel a connection to the past, to lives once lived. To lives once lived in the cabin or along the creek. The reflections, whispers, and silent figures create a narrative. Without words, a story written in light and shadow, sound and absence. Each visitor experiences the hollow moments differently, but all share the impression that the cabin preserves memory, history, and presence in ways. Nightfall intensifies the encounters. Darkness deepens the shadows. Whispers grow more distinct, footsteps more pronounced, and reflections clearer. Guests move through the cabin with heightened awareness, sensing layers of activity that are invisible to the eye but palpable in the mind. Shadow Creek Cabin is more than a remote cabin in the forest. It is a space where the natural and the supernatural intersect, where reflections carry messages from another world, and where every step, glance, and sound is imbued with mystery. The creek, the cabin, and the surrounding trees create an immersive environment that invites observation, reflection, and a quiet acknowledgement of what might dwell just beyond perception. By morning, the haunting is often subtle but lingering. Faces in the windows, whispers, and figures by the creek leave impressions on the memory. Visitors leave with stories to tell, a feeling of the extraordinary woven into the ordinary, and an understanding that Shadow Creek Cabin is a place where the veil between what is seen and unseen is thin, fragile, and ever-present. The cabin and its surroundings remain timeless, a haven for those seeking isolation and a canvas for encounters that defy explanation. Shadow Creek Cabin invites the curious, the observant, and those willing to accept that some presences cannot be fully understood. It is a place where reflection, shadow, and silence come together, creating a haunting, immersive experience that endures long after the forest returns to quiet. Lone Pine Cabin sits deep in the forest of Chaffee County, surrounded by towering pines that sway gently in the wind. The cabina's weathered blends seamlessly with the natural landscape, giving it the appearance of having grown from the earth itself. Its isolation makes it a peaceful retreat by day, but as darkness falls, a different presence seems to awaken. Visitors often report hearing footsteps on the porch long after night has fallen, even when they are certain they are alone. The sound is subtle at first, a soft tapping against the wooden planks, yet it grows louder with each step. It moves with a rhythm that feels deliberate enough to suggest awareness and intent, as though someone or something is pacing, waiting, or watching. Beyond the cabin, the forest becomes a realm of shadows. Figures appear between the trees, glimpsed only for a moment before vanishing into the darkness. They are indistinct and fleeting, yet their presence is unmistakable. Guests describe a feeling of being observed, as if the forest itself is alive, its shadows tracking each movement with quiet patience. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves heightens the sense of unease, blending natural sounds with the inexplicable. Inside the cabin, the eerie activity continues. The air seems charged during these moments, thick with anticipation. Guests often hesitate before crossing the threshold, their senses alert to sounds and movements that defy explanation. The sensation of being watched extends beyond the visible. Even when no figure appears, a heavy awareness lingers in the air. Guests feel a gaze upon them, subtle yet persistent, as if unseen eyes follow every movement. The forest, the cabin, and the spaces in between seem connected, forming a continuous network of observation. Shadows shift in peripheral vision, soft whispers echo in the quiet, and the darkness feels tangible, pressing against the walls, the windows, and the mind. At times, the night brings more than sounds and fleeting shapes. Objects within the cabin occasionally move without explanation. A chair may shift slightly, a table may rock imperceptibly, or personal items may change position. These movements are minor yet unsettling. Subtle reminders that the cabin is not entirely governed by natural laws. Guests describe a heightened sensitivity during these experiences, a mixture of fear, awe, and curiosity that keeps them alert. The forest surrounding Lone Pine Cabin contributes heavily to its atmosphere. The trees form dense walls of green by day and black silhouettes by night. Their branches sway and creak, blending seamlessly with the cabina's mysterious occurrences. Guests often report glimpsing figures emerging from the trees, pausing at the edge of light, and then retreating back into shadow. The interplay between the cabin and its surroundings creates a layered environment where perception and reality intertwine. Lighting within the cabin amplifies the eerie effect. Lanterns and small lamps cast flickering glows that animate the walls and floor. Shadows dance unpredictably, merging with the figures glimpsed outside. Each flicker of light can reveal a movement that vanishes when observed directly, encouraging the mind to question what is real and what is imagined. The contrast between warmth and shadow heightens tension, making every corner and corridor a potential site of unseen activity. Visitors describe nights at Lone Pine Cabin as immersive experiences that engage all senses. The creaking floorboards, the whispers of wind, the distant call of an owl, and the subtle shifts of objects all contribute to a rich and unsettling tapestry. The cabin is a place where ordinary actions take on extraordinary significance. Every glance, step, and breath becomes part of the narrative, as the environment itself seems to respond to the presence of the living. Despite its eerie reputation, Lone Pine Cabin holds a strange allure. Its isolation and the mysterious phenomena draw those seeking solitude, adventure, or a brush with the unknown. Each visitor becomes part of its ongoing story, encountering moments that are fleeting, inexplicable, and deeply memorable. The forest, the cabin, and the shadows merge into an experience that lingers long after departure, imprinting a sense of wonder and unease. Lone Pine Cabin remains a place where the ordinary meets the extraordinary. Footsteps echo on empty porches. Shadowy forms drift between trees. Doors move on their own. And the forest seems to observe every motion. These occurrences are subtle yet profound, creating an atmosphere that is immersive, tense, and unforgettable. Each night spent within or around the cabin is a journey through shadow, sound, and sensation, leaving an indelible mark on all who enter. The experience of Lone Pine Cabin is a study in perception, anticipation, and the intersection of environment and presence. Its weathered wood, surrounding forest, and spectral visitors combine to create a space that feels alive, aware, and timeless. The cabina's charm lies not in overt terror, but in the quiet, persistent mystery that unfolds slowly, capturing the imagination and stirring a sense of both caution and fascination. Every step on its porch, every glance into the trees, and every sound within its walls is a reminder that Lone Pine Cabin is more than a simple retreat. It is a place where shadows move with purpose, whispers drift through the night, and the forest watches silently. Visitors leave carrying memories shaped by mystery, subtle terror, and wonder, ensuring that the legend of Lone Pine Cabin endures through time. The Black Bear Cabin sits in the dense forests of Routt County, its timbered walls darkened by decades of weather and the weight of history. By day, the cabin appears as a rustic retreat, a simple structure surrounded by towering pines and the whisper of the wind through the branches. Yet beneath its quiet exterior lies a past marked by violence and tragedy, a history that seems to linger in the very air that surrounds the building. Visitors approaching the cabin often feel a shift in the atmosphere, a subtle heaviness that grows stronger as they near the front door. The forest itself seems to close in, muffling distant sounds while emphasizing the creaks and groans of the old cabin. The steps leading to the entrance have weathered over time, each board worn smooth yet capable of echoing every footfall with an almost deliberate resonance. Inside, the cabin carries the weight of countless stories. Figures are reported to appear within its rooms at night, fleeting shadows that vanish the moment attention is drawn. They are rarely threatening in form, but their presence is undeniable, leaving a lingering sense of unease that settles on the shoulders of anyone who spends time within these walls. The kitchen, once the heart of daily life in the cabin, is a focal point for strange occurrences. Some visitors describe feeling cold hands brush their shoulders while preparing food, a sensation so vivid that it startles even the most skeptical. Objects sometimes shift subtly, as if guided by unseen fingers, though no wind or physical force could account for the movement. The atmosphere is thick, almost tangible, a reminder that the past has not entirely relinquished its hold on this place. Whispers are a common occurrence within the cabin, though they are not in the language of the present. Visitors report hearing voices speaking in old dialects, words fragmented and distant, yet unmistakably human. These murmurs drift through the rooms and corridors, echoing off the timber walls in a way that suggests the cabin itself is listening, recording, and replaying moments long past. At night, the Black Bear cabin transforms further. Shadows gather at the corners of rooms, shifting in response to the flicker of candlelight or the beam of a flashlight. Figures can appear near the windows, observing silently before retreating into the darkness outside. Even the air seems to change, growing colder and heavier, carrying with it the faint scent of pine and something older, something lingering from times long before. Visitors often describe a feeling of being watched, a sense that the cabina's history is not confined to walls or objects but extends into the very air. Footsteps are heard where no one walks, a subtle echo that seems to follow the rhythm of those inside. Doors may creak open or shut without cause, the sounds punctuating the otherwise still silence with reminders of unseen occupants. The cabina's isolation amplifies these experiences. Surrounded by dense forest and distant from modern roads, it exists as a threshold between the ordinary and the unknown. The journey to reach the Black Bear cabin becomes part of its story. Each step through the forest heightening the senses and preparing visitors for the encounter with what lies inside. Every rustle of leaves, every distant animal call seems layered with meaning. A prelude to the spectral activity waiting within. Despite its eerie reputation, the cabin retains a rugged charm. The walls are lined with the marks of time. The furniture simple yet enduring. And the hearth a reminder of the lives that once filled the space. These elements contrast sharply with the unsettling phenomena, creating an atmosphere that is both captivating and unnerving. The cabin becomes a place where history and the supernatural intertwine, where visitors are drawn into a narrative that unfolds subtly, often without warning. Even in the open spaces surrounding the cabin, the forest carries whispers of the past. Figures can sometimes be glimpsed at the edge of the trees, still and silent, watching before vanishing into the shadows. The wind moves through the branches, carrying faint voices, footsteps, and the feeling of unseen eyes following every movement. The interplay between forest and cabin creates a tension that is constant yet understated, a persistent reminder of the presence that inhabits this isolated area. The Black Bear cabin does not frighten through sudden shocks or violent displays. Its influence is quiet, insistent, and deeply rooted in the sense that permeates the space visitors leave with impressions rather than their memories filled with subtle whispered words, and the sensation of being in the company of those who have never truly departed. As travelers step back into the surrounding forest, leaving the cabin behind, the echoes of its presence linger. Footsteps, shadows, and whispers remain etched in memory, reminders of a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurs. The Black Bear cabin stands quietly among the trees, a testament to the enduring weight of history and the spectral stories that refuse to fade. Time passes slowly here, and the cabin waits, patient and unwavering, for those who are drawn to its dark allure. It is more than a building, it is a vessel of memory, presence, and mystery. The Black Bear cabin endures as a quiet sentinel in the Routt County forest, offering a glimpse into the past, while maintaining the tension between the seen and the unseen, the living and the echoes of what once was. Snow Peak Retreat sits high in the mountains of Summit County, a secluded cabin surrounded by endless white slopes and towering evergreens. During the day, the snow glistens under the sunlight, and the air is crisp and clear. The landscape feels pristine, untouched, and calm. Yet as night falls, the stillness of the snow transforms into something far more enigmatic. Guests often wake to the sound of scratching along the walls. The noise is irregular, soft yet persistent, echoing through the quiet rooms. It seems to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, impossible to pinpoint. The scratching fades as suddenly as it begins, leaving only the silence and the faint chill of awareness that Samania or something was there. Outside, shadowy figures are sometimes seen walking along the snow. Their forms are indistinct, blurred against the moonlit terrain. And they move with a calm, deliberate pace. Observers often describe the feeling of being watched. The sense that these figures are aware of their presence. Yet they vanish when approached, leaving no footprints, no trace. Only the whiteness of the snow. The sounds of the forest contribute to the eerie atmosphere. Some visitors report hearing cries of animals that no longer inhabit the area. These sounds are haunting and unfamiliar, echoing through the trees and over frozen streams. The noises carry across the mountains, distant yet alarmingly close, stirring unease among those who hear them. Each cry is a reminder that the retreat sits on land steeped in history, where nature and memory intertwine. Inside the cabin, the fireplace sometimes ignites itself without reason. Logs catch flames suddenly, casting flickering shadows that dance across the walls and ceiling. The heat is warm, yet there is an unsettling quality to the glow. Guests have described watching the fire start as if guided by invisible hands. The sight is both mesmerizing and unnerving, reinforcing the sense that Snow Peak Retreat is more than a simple mountain cabin. The rooms are quiet and dim. Yet movement seems present. Chairs appear slightly shifted, objects are found out of place, and doors may creak open without provocation. These subtle changes create an atmosphere of constant vigilance. Guests feel the space responding, alive in ways that defy explanation. Each creak, each whisper of air, is amplified by the stillness of the surrounding snow-covered mountains. Walking the grounds at night is an experience of both beauty and tension. The snow muffles footsteps, making the smallest noises more pronounced. Shadows stretch across the slopes, moving with the wind, or perhaps with unseen companions. Figures can be glimpsed at the edge of vision, standing still among the trees or gliding over the snow. They leave no trace, only the lingering impression that the forest is aware of every visitor, every movement. Even the wind seems to carry a voice. It whistles through the evergreens, rustling branches. Rustling branches and scattering snowflakes, creating patterns of light and shadow that play tricks on the mind. What might be a falling branch or drifting snow can easily be mistaken for something watching, following, or waiting. Guests speak of a feeling of presence that persists long after the night has passed, an invisible audience to every step taken in the cold. The retreat's history adds another layer to the experience. Built decades ago, Snow Peak has seen seasons of solitude and storms of visitors, each leaving an imprint in the space. Whether these are remnants of past lives, echoes of nature, or the imagination sharpened by isolation, they become part of the atmosphere that defines Snow Peak Retreat. At dawn, the mountains reclaim their quiet. The figures, the sounds, and the restless energy seem to recede with the first light. The snow reflects the morning sun, and the cabin appears as peaceful as it did during the day. Yet the memory of the night lingers with those who stayed. A quiet awareness that the mountains, the forest, and the retreat itself hold secrets that may never be fully understood. To experience Snow Peak Retreat is to enter a world where the beauty of the mountains coexists with the inexplicable. The snow, the shadows, the mysterious sounds, and the flickering fire all create a tapestry of presence that captivates and unnerves. Guests leave with memories of night-long whispers, fleeting shapes in the snow, and the undeniable sense that Snow Peak Retreat is a place where the ordinary touches the extraordinary. Here, in Summit County, the mountains are not simply silent and cold. The snow reflects more than sunlight, it mirrors the unseen, the mysteries, and the presence that persists even as the world awakens. Snow Peak Retreat is a threshold, a place where the past and present intertwine, and where every night holds the possibility of encountering the unknown. Silver Pine Cabin rests deep within the forests of Larimer County, surrounded by towering pines whose branches sway and whisper even in the lightest breeze. The road ending far before the cabin itself, leaving only dirt paths, shadows, and the deep scent of evergreen. At first glance, it is peaceful, almost idyllic, yet there is a subtle unease that grows the longer one stays. The isolation is immediate, the road ending far before the cabin itself, leaving only dirt paths, shadows, and the deep scent of evergreen. At first glance, it is peaceful, almost idyllic, yet there is a subtle unease that grows the longer one stays. Visitors often notice the windows first. Figures seem to linger behind the glass, blurred and indistinct, yet unmistakably human in shape. They appear at night when the cabin is quiet, sometimes peering out toward the trees, sometimes looking directly at those inside. Approaching the windows reveals nothing but the empty cabin beyond, yet the impression of presence remains, pressing softly on the senses like a memory half remembered. The forest itself seems to participate in the haunting. Whispers drift through the pines, voices carried on the wind, soft and impossible to localize. They rise and fall with the rustle of branches and the creak of the cabina's frame, blending with the natural sounds of the night. Guests report hearing faint names, murmured conversations, and fleeting exclamations that vanish the moment one focuses, as if the forest itself is speaking in a language that belongs to another time. Inside, the cabin is filled with subtle disturbances. Beds shake lightly in the middle of the night. Floorboards creak with unseen footsteps. Doors shift slightly on their hinges. And objects sometimes move from one room to another. Each occurrence is brief, almost imperceptible, but repeated experiences create an impression of awareness, as if the cabin senses its occupants and reacts to their presence. The pine trees surrounding the cabin are more than a backdrop. Their height and density create shadows that shift unnaturally in moonlight. Shapes flit between trunks, glimpsed from the corner of the eye, vanishing when looked at directly. Even in daylight, the forest seems alive with quiet observation, the silence punctuated by occasional rustles that suggest movement just beyond perception. Visitors describe the sensation of being followed, not in a threatening way, but as if eyes exist where no eyes should be. Footsteps echo through empty rooms and hallways, joining the creaks and groans of the old wooden structure. Some report faint breathing, a warm presence in one moment and a cold emptiness in the next. Every sound and shadow is heightened in the stillness, leaving the mind acutely aware of every detail. The cabina's isolation amplifies the experience. With no neighbors, no passing cars, and no modern distractions. Every rustle, every shadow, and every whisper becomes immediate and intense. The natural beauty of the surrounding forest contrasts sharply with the subtle, eerie occurrences inside, creating a tension between the peaceful exterior and the mysterious interior. At night, the windows become mirrors of another world. Figures appear standing just inside the glass. Guests feel gazes upon them, the sense of being observed almost overwhelming at times. Approaching the figures reveals only empty rooms, yet the feeling lingers, as if the impression itself is a presence. Whispers rise from the pine forest, layering with the creaks of the cabin, creating an immersive soundscape that feels alive and aware. Some who stay report feeling gentle touches or hentai touches or cold brushes against their skin during sleep. The experiences are fleeting but vivid, leaving a lasting impression that the cabin is more than a structure, it is a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurs, leaving a lasting impression that the cabin is more than a structure. It is a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurs. The experiences are fleeting but vivid, leaving a lasting impression that the cabin is more than a structure. It is a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurs, leaving a lasting impression that the cabin is more than a structure. It is a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurs, leaving a lasting impression that the cabin is more than a structure. It is a place where the line between the living and the unseen blurs. Some who stay report feeling gentle touches or cold brushes against their skin during sleep. The experience of Silver Pine Cabin is not one of terror, but of profound awareness. It teaches patience and observation, forcing visitors to notice the subtle details of sound, shadow, and reflection. Every creak, every whisper, and every figure glimpsed in the windows becomes a part of a larger tapestry, connecting the cabin, the forest, and the visitors in a web of presence and perception. Even in daylight, the cabina's aura persists. Shadows stretch differently, reflections in windows suggest movement that is not there, and the whispering of the trees carries a sense of memory and continuity. Guests leave with the impression that the forest, the cabin, and the lingering figures are part of an enduring story, one that cannot be fully understood but can be felt in every moment of quiet observation. Silver Pine Cabin is a place where the natural and the supernatural coexist. It is a retreat for solitude and reflection, yet it also offers encounters with the unknown. Subtle and pervasive, leaving visitors with a sense of wonder and an awareness of unseen presence. It is a space that teaches respect for the forest, for history, and for the mysterious threads that connect the visible world to that which lies just beyond perception. Those who return to Silver Pine Cabin often speak of the same sensations. Figures at the windows, whispers carried by the pines, beds that shift beneath them, and the feeling of being observed. Each visit is unique, yet the cabin's essence remains constant. A silent host to those who seek its quiet and to the unseen lives that linger within and beyond its walls. In every shadow, in every whisper, and in every reflection, Silver Pine Cabin tells a story that is both old and timeless. It is a place where observation becomes awareness, presence becomes connection, and the boundary between what is seen and what is sensed dissolves into the stillness of the forest. It is a space alive with mystery, and for those willing to notice, it is a haunting experience that endures long after the forest has returned to its quiet. Dark Timber Lodge stands deep within the dense forests of Jackson County. The loggia's weathered timbers and rustic charm make it a picturesque retreat by day. Yet as dusk falls, an unsettling presence seems to awaken along the winding trails that lead to its doors. Visitors often report seeing dark silhouettes among the trees, figures that linger at the edges of the path before vanishing into the shadows. These fleeting shapes are rarely clear, appearing as shifting forms that seem to observe silently. The forest amplifies every sound, and the faint rustle of leaves or snap of a twig becomes part of a larger, almost deliberate pattern of awareness. Inside the lodge, the atmosphere takes on a heavier, more tangible weight. Guests have recounted footsteps echoing across empty floors, footsteps that do not belong to any living person. The sound moves from room to room, sometimes pausing near doors or windows, creating a rhythm that feels both deliberate and patient. The lodge, though small and rustic, transforms into a space where the ordinary laws of movement and sound seem suspended. In the quiet hours of night, some hear the dragging of chains across the wooden floors. The sound is low, metallic, and chilling, as if unseen hands are pulling something heavy through the halls. It starts subtly, almost easy to dismiss, yet it grows insistent, drawing attention to corners and corridors that appear otherwise empty. The combination of the loggia's creaking timbers and the metallic scrape evokes an awareness of unseen forces that occupy the space alongside the living. The temperature within Dark Timber Lodge can change abruptly, dropping without warning. Guests describe sudden chills that settle across the shoulders or hands, a coldness that seems to follow them from room to room. This chilling air adds to the sense of presence, a reminder that the lodge itself may be alive in ways beyond understanding. Windows rattle lightly in the breeze, shadows deepen unnaturally, and every small sound becomes magnified, weaving an atmosphere of suspense and curiosity. Weaving an atmosphere of suspense and curiosity. Lighting inside the lodge plays a crucial role in shaping the experience. Flickering lamps cast long shadows along the walls, and each glimmer of light seems to reveal movement where none exists. Corners of rooms darken unpredictably, and reflections on polished surfaces hint at forms that vanish when examined directly. The interplay between illumination and shadow blurs perception, creating moments where the mind struggles to distinguish between reality and imagination. The trail leading to Dark Timber Lodge also holds its own mysteries. As guests approach, the forest seems to close in, branches swaying even when the air is still. Silhouettes dart between trees, appearing just long enough to catch the eye, then retreating into darkness. Sounds of footsteps follow along the trail, sometimes mimicking the pace of approaching visitors, creating the impression of being accompanied by invisible travelers. The journey to the lodge becomes an experience in itself, blending natural beauty with subtle unease. Inside, objects occasionally move without explanation. A chair may shift slightly. A table may rock imperceptibly. Or personal items may change position overnight. These small occurrences are enough to unsettle visitors, suggesting that the space responds to those who enter. The combination of sight, sound, and sensation immerses guests in an environment that feels alive, where every detail contributes to a persistent and mysterious presence. Nighttime at Dark Timber Lodge is especially immersive. The forest beyond the windows seems to hum with activity. Every distant sound amplified in the still air. Shadows stretch across the floor, forming shapes that fade with movement. The echoes of footsteps, the metallic drag of chains, and the sudden cold create a layered experience that engages both body and mind. Guests report feeling watched even in moments of stillness. A subtle tension that heightens awareness and curiosity. Despite the unsettling phenomena, Dark Timber Lodge holds a strange allure. Its rustic charm and isolation draw those seeking solitude, adventure, or the thrill of the unexplained. Each visitor becomes part of the loggia's ongoing story, encountering moments that are fleeting, inexplicable, and deeply memorable. The forest, the trail, and the lodge itself intertwine to form a continuous narrative of observation, anticipation, and the interplay between seen and unseen. The experience is a careful balance of tension and fascination. Footsteps echo on empty floors, shadows appear along walls, and chains scrape through the darkness. The air shifts unpredictably, and the forest beyond the windows watches silently. Every sight, sound, and movement adds to the immersive story, making Dark Timber Lodge a space where the natural and supernatural blend seamlessly. Dark Timber Lodge stands as a place where mystery is woven into every plank, shadow, and gust of wind. Visitors leave carrying the memory of footsteps that cannot be explained, shadows that linger at the edges of vision, and a cold presence that seems to follow them beyond the lodge. It is a location where isolation enhances perception, and the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary, ensuring that the legend of Dark Timber Lodge endures with every guest who passes along its trail. Footsteps, shadows, dragging chains, and sudden cold form the signature of the lodge, a subtle yet powerful presence that lingers in the mind long after leaving. The journey along the trail. The crossing of its threshold. And the hours spent within its walls combine to create an experience that is immersive, cinematic, and unforgettable. Dark Timber Lodge remains a hauntingly beautiful testament to the intersection of nature, history, and the unknown, captivating all who enter its domain. Frost Hollow Cabin sits isolated high in the mountains of Gunnison County, surrounded by snow-draped pines and the constant whisper of wind through the peaks. By day, it is a picturesque retreat, a haven of warmth against the icy landscape. Yet as the sun dips below the horizon, the cabin takes on a different presence, one that hints at the mysteries hidden within its walls and the frozen wilderness surrounding it. Travelers arriving at the cabin often notice the air changes as they approach. The snow crunches underfoot in a rhythm that seems louder than it should be. The wind carries sounds that might not belong to the mountain. Windows catch glimmers of movement, though the forest outside appears still and empty. There is a sense that the cabin is not merely a structure but a marker of a space where the ordinary and the inexplicable intersect. At night, figures have been seen outside the windows. Shadows that linger just beyond the glow of interior lights. They are rarely fully visible, more like impressions of presence. Standing silently in the snow, watching those inside. Their forms dissolve when approached, leaving only the memory of a gaze. The uneasy certainty that Samania or Somthinga is observing. Inside the cabin, the temperature often shifts inexplicably. Sudden chills brush across shoulders, moving without source. Guests report feeling icy touches on their arms or hands, fleeting yet distinct. As if someone unseen is walking alongside them through the rooms. Even the warmth of a fire does not always dispel the sensation. And moments of deep cold can follow, settling around those who remain inside. Faint cries sometimes drift through the cabin, soft and distant, as if carried by the mountain wind. They cannot be traced to any source, coming from neither the outside nor the structure itself. The sounds are human in nature, tinged with sorrow, and they seem to echo across the snow and pine, lingering in the air long after they have ceased. Listeners often feel compelled to follow them, yet the cries fade into silence before their origin can be discovered. The rooms are simple, timbered and rustic, yet the shadows seem to gather at the corners, stretching longer than natural light would allow. Furniture, though functional, sometimes appears subtly rearranged, as if guided by invisible hands. The fire crackles and shifts, shadows dancing along walls and ceilings, giving form to fleeting shapes that vanish when attention is directed. Outside, the mountains themselves play a role in the cabina's unsettling presence. Snow drifts gather in unnatural shapes, and the trees sway in windless moments. Trails in the snow sometimes appear where no one has walked, or they vanish abruptly, leaving the surface smooth and unbroken. Hikers and guests passing near the cabin at dusk or after dark occasionally glimpse figures moving through the woods, silent and slow, merging with shadows until they disappear entirely. Many visitors describe an overwhelming sense of being watched, not only inside the cabin but in the clearing around it. Even when standing at the edge of the trees, the mountain seems alive with observation. What seems distant suddenly feels immediate, a presence brushing close despite the empty space. Despite its unsettling phenomena, Frost Hollow Cabin maintains a rugged charm. The timber walls hold the warmth of past occupants. The hearth provides comfort. And the snow-laden landscape offers quiet beauty. These elements contrast sharply with the eerie sensations experienced at night, creating a space where the serene and the supernatural coexist. Visitors often leave with lasting impressions rather than explanations. The mountain and cabin imprinting themselves in memory with images of fleeting shadows, whispers, and cold touches. The cabina's isolation ensures that its stories remain unbroken. Far from roads and towns, the wilderness heightens every sound and sensation, making the presence inside feel all the more immediate. Even brief visits leave a sense of tension, the kind that builds slowly as snow drifts silently past windows. And wind moves through the trees. Every rustle of branches, every flicker of light against the snow, seems imbued with meaning. As if the mountain itself holds memories that are unwilling to remain hidden. Frost Hollow Cabin's reputation is not built on startling displays, but on quiet, persistent presence. The figures at the windows, the icy touches, the cries that echo without origin, all form a consistent pattern of subtle unease. Visitors find themselves alert to every sound, every shift of shadow, as if the mountain and the cabin are testing their awareness, drawing attention to things that might otherwise go unnoticed. As dawn approaches, the cabin returns to a state of stillness. Shadows retreat with the fading night. The temperature steadies. And the cries are replaced by the natural sounds of wildlife and falling snow. Yet the sense of presence lingers. Carried in memory and in the cold air that refuses to warm completely. Travelers leaving the cabin often glance back, noting the windows and the snow beyond. Aware that something unseen remains. Observing the mountain and all who pass through it. Frost Hollow Cabin endures as a quiet sentinel in the high mountains, a place where isolation amplifies the unseen and the unexplained. A place where isolation amplifies the unseen and the unexplained. A space suspended between the ordinary and the extraordinary, a location where the past and the spectral coexist. Where every shadow, every chill and every whisper carries the weight of something not entirely of this world. Pine Ridge Cabin sits secluded in the dense forests of Clear Creek County. Surrounded by towering pines and the constant whisper of wind through the branches. By day, sunlight filters through the canopy, casting dappled shadows across the cabin walls and the forest floor. The area feels peaceful, almost untouched, a haven for those seeking solitude. Yet as night falls, the tranquility of the forest gives way to an atmosphere charged with unease. Shadowy forms move silently through the cabin, gliding along walls and corners without sound. They appear fleetingly in peripheral vision, vanishing when observed directly. The presence is subtle, yet unmistakable, leaving an impression of eyes following every movement. Visitors often hear whispers calling their names, soft and nearly imperceptible at first. The sounds drift through rooms, over the creaking floors and between the timber beams. Sometimes the voices are gentle, almost familiar, and at other times they carry a sense of urgency or longing. Guests describe the feeling of being addressed by someone just beyond perception, prompting a mix of curiosity and apprehension. Within the cabin, objects sometimes shift as if moved by unseen hands. Chairs tilt slightly, books rest at angles they were not placed. And small items vanish, only to reappear in unexpected locations. These occurrences are never violent, yet the subtle manipulations create a persistent awareness that the space is not entirely empty. The cabin feels alive with presence, as though history itself breathes through the rooms. Corners of the cabin seem especially active. Pale figures have been seen standing silently, watching from the edges of the firelight or from the shadows near windows. Their forms are indistinct, often fading into the darkness when approached. The atmosphere is thick with anticipation, the sense that these figures observe quietly, choosing their moments to reveal themselves. Outside, the forest amplifies the mystery. The wind through the pines carries odd sounds, footsteps along the forest floor. Or the distant crack of branches breaking under invisible weight. The isolation of Pine Ridge Cabin intensifies these experiences. With no nearby roads, no passing cars, and no other signs of human activity. Every sound becomes magnified. And every shadow holds the possibility of the unseen. Guests recount nights of uneasy stillness punctuated by subtle movements and noises. A chair might scrape across the wooden floor without contact, or a door might swing open slightly, only to settle again. The temperature shifts suddenly, from warm and comfortable to cold and sharp, as though an invisible presence has passed nearby. Each sensation builds upon the last, creating an immersive experience where the ordinary and the extraordinary coexist. The cabin itself has a history of long-term solitude. Over the decades, caretakers, travelers, and explorers have come and gone, leaving impressions that linger. Some speak of fleeting figures resembling former occupants, their presence a faint echo of lives once lived. Others describe hearing laughter or low conversations that seem impossible to identify, fragments of memory preserved in the very walls of the structure. Exploring the rooms can feel like stepping into a suspended moment between past and present. Light from lamps or the fire casts long, shifting shadows that often appear animate. Movement at the edge of perception is common, a reminder that Pine Ridge Cabin is more than wood, nails, and glass. The environment itself seems to participate in a subtle narrative, weaving sensations, sounds, and glimpses of form into a story that cannot be fully explained. Visitors leave the cabin with impressions rather than proofs. The sensations linger, the echo of whispers in empty rooms. The glimpse of a pale figure in the corner. The unexplained shifting of objects. Each memory carries with it a sense of the unseen. A recognition that Pine Ridge Cabin exists on the boundary between the familiar and the unknown. Even in daylight, the forest holds its secrets. Sunlight through the pines illuminates the cabin differently each day. But shadows persist in the corners and under the eaves. The cabina's presence is enduring, a place where visitors confront both the beauty of isolation and the unsettling touch of the unseen. Pine Ridge Cabin offers an experience that is quiet, contemplative, and charged with mystery. Every creak, every whisper, every shadowed corner contributes to the narrative that unfolds nightly in its rooms and along its corridors. The forest, the cabin, and the history intertwined create an atmosphere that is immersive, enigmatic, and unforgettable. Here, in the heart of Clear Creek County, Pine Ridge Cabin stands as a reminder that some places retain the memory of those who came before. It is a space where the ordinary merges seamlessly with the extraordinary. Where shadows are never empty. And where every step taken at night is accompanied by the subtle awareness of presence, unseen but unmistakable. Timber Hollow Retreat sits deep in the forests of Eagle County, a cabin surrounded by towering evergreens and the quiet murmur of the mountains. The isolation is immediate, the road ending far from the property, leaving only dirt paths and the shadows of the towering pines. At first, the retreat seems peaceful, a perfect escape from the world, yet beneath the stillness lies a subtle, almost imperceptible tension. Guests often notice it first at night. Footsteps echo across the grounds, deliberate and slow, yet when one steps outside, the space is empty. The snow or fallen leaves remain undisturbed, leaving no trace of movement. Those who listen carefully report hearing a rhythm, the soft crunch of shoes over the earth, punctuated by the whispering wind through the branches. The porch of the cabin is a frequent site of sightings. Figures drift along its edges, pale and indistinct in the moonlight. Approaching them reveals nothing but emptiness, yet the sensation of being watched persists, an awareness that refuses to be ignored. The air grows colder near the railing, and a shiver often runs down the spine of those standing close. Inside the cabin, the experiences continue. Guests feel an unseen presence brushing past them in hallways and living spaces. Doors creak open slightly on their own, and chairs shift subtly as if someone has just moved them. The disturbances are never violent, but they are insistent, leaving a clear impression that the retreat is not as empty as it seems. Each creak and subtle movement is amplified by the stillness of the night, creating a heightened sense of awareness. The forest surrounding Timber Hollow is alive in its own way. Whispers rise through the pines, carried on the wind, soft and impossible to locate. Names, half-formed sentences, and fleeting sounds drift in the darkness, vanishing the moment one tries to focus. Guests report that the voices seem to react to their presence, rising when approached and fading when left alone, as if the trees themselves are communicating in a language lost to time. Windows become reflections of another world after dusk. Guests see shapes behind the glass, standing silently. Sometimes at the edges of the porch or within the forest beyond. Approaching these forms reveals nothing but empty space. Yet the sensation of observation remains. It is as if the retreat and its surroundings exist in two overlapping realities. One visible and one just beyond perception. Even in daylight, the feeling persists. The forest seems denser, the trees bending in ways that suggest movement just out of sight. Sounds of rustling leaves carry an echo that does not belong to any known source. Every corner of Timber Hollow retains a subtle tension, a reminder that the forest and the cabin have histories that linger in the air and in the minds of those who enter. Visitors describe moments of sudden awareness, where the presence is felt without sight or sound. A soft brush on the shoulder, a cold draft that circles a room, or the subtle vibration of the floor beneath a bed. These experiences are fleeting but unmistakable, creating an impression of the retreat as a space alive with hidden energy, sensitive to every movement and intention. The isolation amplifies every sensation. With no nearby neighbors and no passing traffic. Every sound, shadow, and whisper becomes immediate and intense. The forest, the cabin, and the unseen figures are intertwined, forming a tapestry that is both natural and otherworldly. Guests report that even after leaving Timber Hollow, the feeling of being watched lingers, a reminder that some presence endures beyond the physical boundaries of the retreat. At night, the cabin becomes a theater of subtle occurrences. Figures appear at the edge of vision. Footsteps echo along the deck. And the whispers of the forest rise and fall in cadence with the rustling trees. Guests often find themselves pausing, listening, and observing. Aware that each moment is shared with entities that are rarely seen directly but always sensed. Timber Hollow Retreat offers an experience of profound awareness. It is not a place of terror, but of subtle connection. Where observation becomes engagement. And silence becomes meaningful. The guests leave with the impression that the forest and cabin are alive. In ways not entirely understood. A presence that is patient, watchful, and persistent. Even when the sun rises, the retreat's atmosphere remains. Shadows fall differently, reflections in windows suggest movement that is not there. And the whispers of the pines continue in hushed undertones. Timber Hollow Retreat exists as a space where natural beauty and the unseen converge. Creating an immersive environment that is both captivating and haunting. Those who return often describe the same sensations. Footsteps that are never traced. Figures that vanish when approached. Whispers that carry across the forest. Each experience is unique. Yet the essence of Timber Hollow remains constant. It is a retreat that observes as much as it shelters. A space where the living and the unseen share the same boundaries. In every shadow, every whisper, and every reflection. Where awareness deepens, where the line between the visible and the unseen blurs. And where the forest and cabin become participants in a narrative that endures long after the visitor has departed. A rustic retreat embraced by towering pines and the gentle curve of the creek that gives it its name. And birdsong filling the air. Along the banks of the creek and in the shadows of the surrounding trees. Visitors often notice figures standing just beyond the tree line. They are fleeting, half seen, appearing for moments before melting into the darkness. The forms are not always clear, sometimes resembling tall silhouettes, other times seeming almost insubstantial. Their presence is accompanied by an inexplicable sense of observation, a feeling that the woods are alive with unseen watchers. Across the creek, soft cries float through the air. They are distant, ethereal, as if carried on the wind from another time. Some visitors feel compelled to follow the sound, only to find the banks empty and the water glistening peacefully under the moonlight. The cries seem to shift with the breeze, lingering in the mind longer than in the ear, creating a persistent sense of curiosity and unease. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere carries its own unsettling energy. Doors have been known to open without warning, some swinging slowly on their hinges, others slamming abruptly as if pushed by invisible hands. The wooden floors creak in ways that echo footsteps, though no one is present, and every sound is amplified by the quiet that envelopes the cabin at night. Cold spots appear without warning, sudden chills that brush across the skin and settle along shoulders and arms. The air seems to thicken in these moments, and the temperature drops in specific areas, intensifying the sensation that the cabin is not entirely empty. The combination of visual, auditory, and tactile sensations creates a heightened awareness, drawing every sense into a state of alert. The creek itself plays a central role in the cabina's mysterious presence. The water reflects the moon and trees with perfect clarity. Yet its stillness is occasionally broken by ripples that have no visible source. Mist rises from the surface during cool nights, curling around the banks and giving the surrounding woods a spectral quality. Figures seen in the shadows often appear near the water, their forms elongated and distorted by the fog, creating moments that are both mesmerizing and unsettling. Walking the surrounding trails becomes an immersive experience. The forest is alive with subtle movement, branches swaying even when the air is still. Occasional rustles in the underbrush suggest more than wildlife. The shadows between trees seem to stretch and shift as if observing each step. Guests often feel a compelling mixture of fear and fascination, knowing that the natural beauty of the creek and forest is intertwined with an unseen presence that lingers quietly, watching. Even the interior of the cabin reflects this duality of comfort and unease. Lamps cast flickering pools of light, illuminating spaces that seem to move just beyond perception. Shadows twist along walls and corners, forming shapes that disappear when approached. These subtle signs are enough to make guests aware that the cabin's environment is responsive, not entirely governed by ordinary rules. At night, the experience intensifies. The soft cries across the creek blend with the whisper of wind through the trees. The occasional slam of a door echoes sharply, contrasting with the gentle burble of water outside. Shadows in the corners of rooms seem to stretch and recede, and the cold spots appear at moments when attention is drawn elsewhere, ensuring that awareness remains heightened. Each sound, each movement, and each sensation contributes to a cinematic, immersive atmosphere that envelopes anyone who enters the space. Whisper Creek Cabin is not merely a building or a location, but an experience that engages the senses and the imagination. The combination of visual anomalies, mysterious sounds, and tactile sensations create a layered narrative that unfolds with each moment spent at the cabin. Guests leave carrying a sense of wonder and unease, memories of figures in the woods, cries floating across the water, and doors moving of their own accord. The allure of Whisper Creek Cabin lies in its ability to blend natural beauty with subtle paranormal activity. The creek reflects both moonlight and shadow, the forest frames movement both real and imagined, and the cabin itself becomes a vessel for experiences that defy simple explanation. Visitors find themselves both captivated and cautious, drawn to the environment while remaining acutely aware of the presence that lingers quietly around them. Soft cries, shifting objects, shadowy figures, and cold spots combine to define the essence of Whisper Creek Cabin. The journey along the trails, the quiet observation of the creek, and the hours spent inside the cabin immerse guests in a story that is continuously unfolding. Each experience is unique yet part of a greater narrative, one where the natural world and the unseen converge, creating an unforgettable atmosphere that continues to resonate long after the final step is taken away from the creek and cabin. Whisper Creek Cabin stands as a testament to the interplay between serenity and the mysterious, a place where the ordinary transforms into the extraordinary. Visitors leave with the memory of sounds and sights that cannot be fully explained, a lingering chill, and a heightened sense of awareness. It is a location that engages the senses, sparks curiosity, and ensures that the legend of Whisper Creek Cabin endures with every guest who walks along its creek and through its shadowed rooms. Shadow Pines Cabin sits deep in the forests of Routt County, nestled among towering pines that block much of the sky. By day, the cabin appears serene, a rustic retreat surrounded by Naturia's calm. The air is crisp, scented with pine and earth, and the only sounds are the distant calls of birds and the whisper of the wind through the trees. Yet as evening falls, the forest and the cabin transform, revealing an entirely different presence. Visitors often report that the cabin feels alive in ways that cannot be explained. Mirrors reflect more than their own images, showing glimpses of movement just beyond the edges of sight. Guests notice shapes shifting in the reflections, figures that drift across floors or appear in corners where no one stands. These reflections seem intent, observing silently, then vanishing when approached. Inside, the temperature shifts unpredictably. A warm room can suddenly grow icy. And cold touches brush against arms or shoulders, brief and fleeting but unmistakable. These sensations provoke unease, a sense of being accompanied by unseen presences. The cabin's layout amplifies the feeling, with timbered rooms and high ceilings creating pockets of shadow where the unknown seems to gather. The forest surrounding Shadow Pines Cabin adds to the cabin's mystique. At night, the trees sway and rustle even without wind, moving as though guided by some unseen force. Shadows among the trunks deepen, forming shapes that seem almost human in movement. Visitors have reported glimpses of figures just beyond the edge of the clearing, standing silently, then blending seamlessly into the forest when observed directly. Footsteps echo through the cabin, soft and deliberate, yet when guests rise to investigate, the halls are empty. The halls are empty. Objects sometimes shift slightly, as if moved by invisible hands. And lights appear to flicker without electrical cause. Each event is subtle, building an atmosphere of suspense rather than sudden shock. Over time, the accumulation of these small phenomena leaves a lasting impression of presence, of history, and of the unexplained. Of presence, of history, and of the unexplained. Whispers occasionally drift through the rooms, soft and indistinct, seeming to come from walls, floors, or ceilings. The sound is human but cannot be traced, rising and fading with no apparent source. Guests often describe the experience as deeply unsettling, a sense that voices from the past or the unseen are trying to communicate, or simply marking the presence of those who linger in Shadow Pines. The mirrors of the cabin hold particular fascination. Reflections sometimes move independently of those standing before them. A guest might see a figure behind them, only to turn and find nothing there. Other times, faces appear briefly in the glass, pale and watching, before dissolving back into the reflective surface. These experiences heighten the cabin's reputation, leaving visitors both intrigued and wary. Even the quietest nights are never fully silent. The wind seems to carry messages through the trees, branches brushing together with the sound of distant footsteps. Shadows stretch unnaturally along the cabin walls, elongating and twisting with the flicker of lanterns or fireplaces. The combined effect is a sensation that the cabin and its surroundings are aware, responding subtly to those who enter. Guests often describe a feeling of being observed while moving through the forest or even the cabina's open spaces. The eyes of the unseen seem to track each step, a persistent awareness that is difficult to shake. Paths through the woods appear altered, snow or foliage rearranged, as if the land itself marks the presence of the invisible. The forest seems to breathe, expanding and contracting, drawing visitors into a heightened state of alertness. Despite these unnerving elements, Shadow Pines Cabin retains its charm as a retreat. Timbered walls, warm hearths, and quiet clearings provide comfort during daylight hours. The contrast between daytime serenity and nighttime unease creates a layered experience, where beauty and mystery coexist. Visitors leave with a sense of wonder and lingering apprehension, aware that the cabin holds secrets beyond ordinary understanding. The cumulative effect of subtle phenomena, shadows, reflections, whispers, and cold to chaser, creates an atmosphere that is difficult to forget. Every visitor senses the weight of history and presence within the cabin, the forest, and the surrounding mountains. Each sound and movement contributes to a narrative that feels alive, as if the cabin itself tells its story to those willing to listen carefully. As dawn breaks, the forest and cabin settle into their daytime calm. Shadows retreat with the fading night, whispers disappear with the wind, and reflections return to normal. Yet the impressions of the night linger, etched in memory, carrying a sense of the extraordinary. Visitors glance back at the cabin and the darkened pines, knowing that what they experienced is both a part of the place and beyond explanation. Shadow Pine's cabin endures as a space suspended between the ordinary and the supernatural. It is a cabin of beauty, history, and mystery, where every glance in a mirror, every shift of shadow, and every icy touch suggests the presence of something unseen. The forest and the cabin remain intertwined, creating a haunting yet captivating experience. A location that challenges perception and invites visitors to explore the boundary between the natural and the extraordinary. Lone Wolf Cabin sits isolated among the dense pines and rugged terrain of Summit County. By day, sunlight filters through the branches, creating patterns on the forest floor that shift with the wind. The cabin appears peaceful and inviting, a refuge from the demands of the modern world. But as dusk settles, the forest transforms. Shadows stretch long and dark across the snow or the earth, and a sense of anticipation hangs in the cold air. Figures appear intermittently among the trees. Pale forms glimpsed between trunks, moving silently, and vanishing when looked at directly, leaving an impression that something watches and waits. Visitors report whispers carried on the wind. Soft and distant at first, the voices grow clearer, calling out from the shadows. The sounds seem to come from multiple directions, surrounding those who listen and blending with the natural rustle of leaves and the snap of twigs under unseen feet. The effect is subtle but pervasive, making each step feel heavier, each movement more deliberate. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere shifts again. Cold air gathers in corners, chilling even when the day has been warm. Visitors feel its touch on the nape of their necks or along their arms, a sensation that is tangible yet unexplained. Shadows appear in the corners of the rooms, shapes that flicker with movement but disappear when approached. These fleeting forms give the sense of lives intersecting with the present, echoes of those who may have once lived or wandered through the surrounding woods. The cabin itself creaks under its own weight. Floorboards respond to footsteps that are not present, and doors sometimes shift slightly as though moved by unseen hands. The subtle disturbances are never violent, but they create an unshakable awareness that lingers long after visitors leave. Outside, the forest remains watchful. Figures appear at the edges of vision, standing still or gliding between trees. Snow, rain, or fallen leaves crunch beneath invisible feet, adding to the sense that the woods themselves hold memories. Even in daylight, visitors often feel an inexplicable tension, the knowledge that the forest has stories it is unwilling to fully reveal. The cabin is small, with narrow rooms and low ceilings, which amplifies the sensations within. Whispers echo along the walls, and faint shapes appear near windows or along the far corners. Some visitors have reported hearing sounds that resemble footsteps pacing from room to room, accompanied by soft sighs or murmurs. These experiences are immersive, drawing attention to the boundaries between the natural and the unexplained. Time within Lone Wolf Cabin feels different. Minutes stretch as the senses remain heightened. Guests describe a growing awareness of being observed, as though the figures outside the cabin are following not just movement, but attention and intention. The feeling is neither threatening nor malicious, but deeply intimate, as if the woods themselves are alive and conscious. As if the woods themselves are alive and conscious. The feeling is deeply intimate. As if the woods themselves are alive and conscious. The history of the area adds layers to the experience. Summit County has long been a region of isolation and rugged landscapes. Stories of those who disappeared, travelers who lost their way, and settlers who vanished without explanation mingle with the natural beauty of the forest. Lone Wolf Cabin sits at the intersection of these tales, embodying a threshold where past and present, seen and unseen, overlap. Each night, the forest breathes around the cabin. The wind moves through the pines, carrying sounds and scents that suggest movement just beyond perception. Shadows shift along the walls, and pale figures emerge at the edge of vision. The sensation of cold air brushing past becomes almost constant, a reminder that the space is shared, and that the solitude one seeks here is never complete. Visitors leave Lone Wolf Cabin changed, carrying with them the memory of whispers, glimpses of figures, and the feeling of presence that lingers long after departing. The experience is both subtle and profound, leaving questions unanswered and a sense of wonder intact. The cabin is not merely a structure of wood and nails, it is a living intersection of history, memory, and the unseen forces that continue to inhabit the forest. Even in the warmth of morning, the impression remains. Shadows are longer than they should be. The forest carries a weight of stories. And the air retains a chill that seems to reach deep within. Lone Wolf Cabin stands as a testament to the quiet power of the unknown. Where every step, every whisper, and every fleeting figure creates an atmosphere that is immersive, enigmatic, and unforgettable. Those who venture here find more than a remote retreat. They encounter a place where the forest, the cabin, and the shadows coexist. Where every moment is observed. And where the unseen remains present, patient, and endlessly watchful. Frosted Pines Retreat sits deep in the forests of Larimer County. The path leading to the cabin winds through the trees, narrow and often silent. Except for the occasional rustle of wildlife. At first glance, the retreat feels peaceful, a quiet refuge from the world. Yet a subtle unease lingers in the air. As though the forest itself is aware of those who enter. Guests often notice the first signs at night. The snow remains undisturbed, and the forest holds only its natural stillness. The sounds are fleeting, almost teasing, as if the cabin itself is alive and aware of each movement. The deck becomes a stage for unusual occurrences. Figures drift silently along its edges, pale and insubstantial under the moonlight. They move with a fluid grace, disappearing when approached, leaving no trace behind. The cold air carries their subtle movements, heightening every whisper of whine through the branches. Guests describe a sensation of being observed, a presence close enough to sense but never fully see. Windows offer their own peculiar reflections. Faces appear momentarily behind the glass, sometimes pressed near the panes, their features indistinct and fleeting. When approached, the faces vanish, leaving only empty frames and the faint chill of the winter air. These moments create a tension that lingers long after the initial sighting, a feeling that the retreat contains more than just wood and stone. Inside the cabin, the presence continues. Knocks resound on walls and doors. Seemingly deliberate yet impossible to locate. Chairs shift slightly, and personal items occasionally appear in different positions from where they were left. The disturbances are subtle, never violent, but they carry a clear message. And its history, or perhaps its memory, continues to make itself known. The forest surrounding Frosted Pines Retreat is a constant companion to the phenomena. Whispers drift along the trails, soft and almost musical, yet their source is never identifiable. Names, half-formed sentences, and sighs travel with the wind, vanishing as quickly as they appear. Guests often feel drawn to the trees, sensing movement just beyond their line of sight, though the forest seems to conceal its secrets carefully. At night, the cabin becomes a theater of quiet disturbances. Figures appear in peripheral vision, drifting between the shadows and snow-covered trees. Footsteps resound on wooden floors, echoing in rhythm with the unseen presence. Even the simplest movements, a door opening, a chair creaking, become significant, imbued with an awareness that the retreat is alive in ways that cannot be fully understood. The isolation of frosted pines amplifies every sensation. With no neighbors nearby and no passing traffic, every whisper, knock, and shadow becomes immediate and intense. The forest, the cabin, and the unseen figures seem intertwined, forming an environment that is both natural and otherworldly. Guests report a heightened sense of perception, noticing details in the wind, the snow, and the shifting shadows that are easily overlooked elsewhere. Many visitors describe sudden, inexplicable awareness. A brush against a shoulder. A fleeting reflection in a window, or a subtle vibration beneath the floorboards. Creates a sense of intimacy with the retreat's hidden inhabitants. Even during daylight hours, the feeling persists. Shadows stretch differently across the deck, and the forest seems denser. Its trees bending and swaying as if influenced by unseen observers. Sounds of distant wildlife echo with an added resonance. And the whispers of the wind seem more articulate, more intentional. The retreat retains its atmosphere of quiet awareness. A subtle tension woven into every corner and crevice. Guests often pause in moments of stillness, listening intently to the environment around them. The combination of snow, shadows, and whispered sounds creates an immersive experience where awareness is heightened, and perception becomes more than a passive act. Figures may appear at the edges of vision, footsteps may echo without source, and the forest trails carry whispers that seem meant for those willing to listen. The retreat is not a place of fear but of observation. Every creak of the floorboards. Every fleeting reflection. Every whispered sound. Contributes to an ongoing dialogue between the living and the unseen. Frosted Pines Retreat teaches that presence can be felt in subtle ways. And that the forest, cabin, and its hidden figures participate in a shared, enduring narrative. Even as guests depart, the sense of being observed lingers. Shadows in photographs. Fleeting images in memory. And the residual feeling of whispers. Create an impression that the retreat continues to watch, to exist, and to remember long after the human presence has gone. Frosted Pines Retreat exists as a living space where the natural and the spectral converge. Offering an experience that is both haunting and profoundly beautiful. Within the quiet of the forest and the stillness of the cabin. Where shadows move independently. Where whispers carry through the trees. And where the unseen shapes the experience of every guest. In this secluded corner of Larimer County, awareness becomes part of the environment itself, and every visitor leaves with a lasting impression of a retreat alive with subtle, persistent presence. Black Hollow Cabin sits secluded in Jackson County, surrounded by dense forest and cliffs that descend sharply toward a shadowed valley. The forest closes in, and the cabin becomes a focal point for experiences that leave visitors questioning what is real and what belongs to the unseen. Figures are sometimes seen at the edges of the windows, fleeting glimpses that vanish when approached. They are often described as shadowy silhouettes, their features indistinct, yet their presence is undeniably felt. These appearances seem random yet purposeful, as if the figures are observing from the shadows, quietly acknowledging each visitor. Doors in the cabin have a life of their own. Visitors report moments of hesitation, standing just inside the doorway, unsure whether to enter a room. The sensation is unsettling because it occurs with no wind, no mechanical cause, and no visible force. Each movement of a door is accompanied by a heightened awareness, a sense that the cabin itself is attentive to those who enter. Whispers drift through the air, often so soft that they are barely perceptible. Some sound like hushed conversations, fragments of words that cannot be fully understood. Carried from the corners of rooms or the spaces between trees. Occasionally, soft cries echo across the forest. A sound that seems to float from unseen locations. The combination of whispers and cries creates an atmosphere that is both delicate and disconcerting. Suggests presence without revealing origin, inviting curiosity while inspiring caution. The surrounding forest adds to the cabina's enigmatic nature. Trees stretch high and dense, blocking starlight and shaping shadows that twist unnaturally in the moonlight. Along the cliffs, silhouettes can be glimpsed in peripheral vision, only to vanish when looked at directly. The terrain itself seems to enhance the feeling of being watched, with shadows extending farther than expected. Rustles in the underbrush that suggest more than wildlife. Visitors quickly learn that the woods around Black Hollow Cabin are not silent observers but active participants in the unfolding experience. Inside, the cabin is both comforting and unnerving. Warm lights illuminate wooden beams and rustic furniture, yet the shadows that gather in corners and behind doorways give the space an unpredictable quality. Footsteps echo across the floors, sometimes in synchronization with a guest's movement, other times entirely independent. Objects shift subtly, a chair moved a few inches, a small item displaced from a table. These occurrences are never violent but carry an unmistakable message: the space is inhabited by more than what can be seen. Night amplifies the cabin's spectral qualities. The wind through the pines carries strange murmurs that seem to answer the cries across the cliffs. Windows reflect shadowed forms that linger for a moment longer than a reflection should. The air grows cold in certain areas without any identifiable source, brushing along skin in sudden chills that demand attention. The experience of Black Hollow Cabin is layered, drawing visitors into an interplay between natural beauty and the unexplained. The forest, cliffs, and cabin are intertwined with an unseen presence that manifests through fleeting shapes, sudden sounds, and inexplicable movements. Each visitor's encounter is unique, yet there is a continuity to the experiences that suggests a deeper connection between the land and the lingering spirits within it. As the night deepens, the whispers grow more distinct yet remain just out of comprehension. Figures appear momentarily at windows or in the periphery of vision. The subtle movements of doors and objects continue to remind guests of their surroundings. The sensation of being watched never fully fades, and each sound and shadow contributes to an immersive narrative that unfolds continuously throughout the night. Black Hollow Cabin is not merely a destination. It is a stage where nature and the unseen converge. The cliff edges, the dense trees, and the cabin itself are vessels through which experiences that defy ordinary explanation are felt. Visitors leave with impressions of figures, sounds, and movements that remain vivid in memory, carrying a sense of the mysterious long after the cabin has disappeared behind the forest line. In this isolated corner of Jackson County, Black Hollow Cabin stands as a testament to the interaction between environment and the inexplicable. Its windows, doors, and shadowed corners reveal glimpses of a world that exists alongside our own. Guests depart with a heightened awareness, memories of whispers and cries, and a lingering sense that the cabin continues to watch over the forest, quietly holding its stories and waiting for the next visitor to step into its enigmatic embrace. Eagle's Shadow Cabin stands perched high in the mountains of Summit County, surrounded by dense evergreens that filter the light into the cabina's weathered timbers. By day, it appears as a secluded retreat, offering breathtaking views of snow-capped peaks and the quiet serenity of the forest. The air is crisp and clean, filled with the scent of pine and cold stone, inviting guests to relax and unwind. Yet as night falls, the cabin transforms, revealing a presence that defies explanation. Visitors often report shadows that move independently of any light source. They shift along walls and across floors, lingering in corners or stretching unnaturally. The shapes are fleeting, vanishing when approached, but their presence is unmistakable. These movements create a sense of being watched, of space inhabited by forces unseen yet undeniably active. Within the cabin, the air is rarely still. Cold gusts drift through rooms, brushing past shoulders and nipping at skin even when doors and windows are closed. Some guests describe the sensation of being followed, footsteps echoing behind them that vanish when they turn to look. The sounds of the cabin are equally mysterious. Chains dragging across wooden floors have been reported by multiple visitors. Chairs shift slightly, and objects are occasionally displaced without explanation, leaving an unsettling impression that the cabin itself is alive, aware of every movement and presence. Figures sometimes appear in corners, motionless and silent. They vanish when observed directly, leaving only a lingering sense of their being. Guests have reported the sensation of someone standing nearby even when the room is empty, a pressure in the air that is both tactile and psychological. The cabin's layout, with its low beams and shadowed nooks, amplifies the feeling, creating pockets where the unseen seems to gather and watch. Even during moments of quiet, the cabin holds an undercurrent of activity. The forest outside rustles with a life of its own, branches scratching against windows and the wind whispering through the pines. Shadows outside sometimes seem to mirror those within, reflecting the movements of unseen inhabitants. Visitors have recounted glimpses of forms standing at the edge of the tree-line, motionless yet unmistakably present. The atmosphere inside Eagle's shadow cabin is layered with tension and curiosity. Every creak of timber, every whisper of wind, feels magnified. The cold gusts, the dragging chains, and the fleeting figures combine to form a narrative of presence and memory. As if the cabin remembers the events of long ago and continues to act as a vessel for them. Guests cannot help but feel a connection to the past, a lingering energy that reaches across time. At night, the cabin takes on a surreal quality. Shadows stretch and bend unnaturally along walls, responding to movements in ways that defy logic. Chains clatter intermittently, seemingly marking a path or rhythm only they can understand. Cold currents move in patterns that follow guests from room to room, creating an invisible choreography of sensation. Each event is subtle, yet cumulative, building an atmosphere of profound mystery. Visitors frequently describe a heightened sense of awareness while inside. The combination of visual phenomena, tactile chills, and unexplained sounds creates an immersive experience that engages all senses. Every step taken within the cabin feels significant, as though the act of moving through space is acknowledged by unseen entities. The forest beyond the walls adds to the tension, a silent audience observing from shadows that shift and stretch as night deepens. Despite these unnerving occurrences, its timbered walls, stone fireplace, and mountain views offer comfort and refuge during daylight. The contrast between daytime serenity and nighttime presence underscores the cabina's unique character, blending natural allure with the thrill of the unexplained. Guests leave with lasting impressions, a mixture of awe and unease, knowing they have encountered a place where the ordinary and the extraordinary intersect. Eagle's Shadow Cabin remains a destination for those drawn to mystery and history. The shadows, the sounds, and the cold gusts are not merely disturbances but components of a living narrative that stretches across time. Visitors carry the experience with them, aware that what they saw, felt, and sensed is both real and elusive, leaving questions that linger long after the mountains fade from view. The cabin endures as a testament to the unseen. It invites curiosity, demands attention, and rewards those willing to observe carefully. Every creak, every shadow, every whispered gust of wind contributes to a story that is continuously unfolding. A narrative suspended between the tangible and the spectral. Eagle's Shadow Cabin is a place where history, mystery, and presence converge, offering an unforgettable encounter for those who venture within. Offering an unforgettable encounter for those who venture within. The cabin endures as a testament to the unseen. As dawn approaches, the shadows recede, the chains fall silent, and the cold gusts fade with the first light. Yet the memories of the night remain, etched into the minds of visitors who have walked its halls. The forest and cabin settle into daytime calm, but the presence that defines Eagle's shadow cabin endures, waiting in quiet anticipation for the next nightfall. Misty Ridge Cabin perches atop a ridge in Gunnison County, shrouded in fog that clings to the surrounding trees and drapes over the landscape like a soft, whispering veil. The cabin itself is small and weathered, its timbers aged by countless seasons. From a distance, it appears serene, a quiet refuge amid the vast wilderness. Yet those who approach notice a tension in the air, a subtle weight that seems to follow them along the trail. Figures are sometimes glimpsed moving along the ridges or between the trees, pale forms that vanish into the fog when approached, leaving only a sense of observation and presence. Whispers carry across the ridge, soft and indecipherable at first. They seem to come from no particular direction, flowing with the wind and weaving between the trees. Sometimes the sounds are faint, barely audible, but they intensify when visitors pause or attempt to listen more closely. The effect is disorienting, as if the ridge itself is alive, speaking in a language known only to the mist and the shadows. Inside the cabin, the atmosphere is equally charged. Cold drafts drift along the floorboards, brushing against the arms of those who enter. A chair might tilt slightly or a window shutter creak, hinting at unseen forces present within the space. Shadows appear in the corners of rooms, shifting with the movements of the fog outside, and objects occasionally move just enough to catch attention. A chair might tilt slightly or a window shutter creak, hinting at unseen forces present within the space. The feeling is subtle but unmistakable, a touch that is at once fleeting and invasive. Shadows appear in the corners of rooms, shifting with the movements of the fog outside, and objects occasionally move just enough to catch attention. The forest surrounding Misty Ridge Cabin is dense, the trees standing like silent sentinels. As night falls, the fog thickens, reducing visibility to mere feet. Sounds are amplified, each rustle of leaves or snap of a branch carrying the suggestion of footsteps not made by the living. Visitors often describe the sensation of being followed, though the trail behind them remains empty, and the stillness of the forest deepens the unease. The stillness of the forest deepens the unease. Time within the cabin seems to stretch and contract. Minutes pass slowly, punctuated by the occasional whisper or fleeting movement outside. The ridge seems to hold on to visitors, compelling them to notice the details that might otherwise be ignored. The experience is immersive, drawing the senses into a heightened awareness of both place and presence. Visitors have reported glimpses of figures along the forest trails, often seen from the corner of the eye. They appear human in shape, sometimes standing still, sometimes moving with deliberate grace. Yet they vanish when focused upon. The effect is haunting, leaving the impression of lives or memories intersecting with the present. Lingering just beyond perception. The cabin itself seems to breathe with the environment. Fog presses against the windows and wraps around the eaves, flowing inside in subtle currents. The wind moves through the trees with a whispering cadence, as if the forest itself participates in the presence that permeates the ridge. Even when the sun rises, the mist remains, softening the outlines of the trees and hills, creating an otherworldly tableau that persists throughout the day. Sounds within and around the cabin are never entirely explained. Soft footsteps echo across the wooden floor, though no one is present. The effect is cumulative, a layering of the natural and the unknown that creates a space of constant anticipation. Where each movement, sound, or shadow might be significant. Those who spend time at Misty Ridge Cabin often report a lingering sensation after leaving. The ridge, the fog, and the forest seem to imprint themselves on memory. creating a heightened awareness of sound, shadow, and presence. Even when far from the location, the ridge continues to exist not merely as terrain, but as a threshold between the visible and invisible, where past and present converge in subtle, compelling ways. Visitors carry with them the sense that the ridge continues to exist, even when far from the location. That the ridge continues to exist not merely as terrain, but as a threshold between the visible and invisible, where past and present converge in subtle, compelling ways. Visitors carry with them the sense that the ridge continues to exist, even when far from the location. Misty Ridge Cabin is a place where the ordinary becomes extraordinary. Each whisper, each shadow, and each unexplained chill contributes to an atmosphere that is immersive, reflective, and hauntingly beautiful. The ridge does not demand attention, yet it commands it, inviting those who approach to recognize the thin boundary between the natural world and the unseen. As night deepens, the mist thickens further, swallowing trails, trees, and even the silhouette of the cabin itself. Figures move silently within this vapor. Whispers rise from no identifiable source, and invisible hands trace the air around those who linger too long. It is an experience both subtle and profound, leaving a lasting impression on all who venture to the high ridge. Misty Ridge Cabin stands as a testament to the quiet power of isolation and the mystery of the unknown. It is a place where the forest, the fog, and the shadows intertwine to create an environment both serene and unsettling. Visitors encounter more than a cabin on a ridge, they encounter a space where every sound, every movement, and every fleeting shape speaks to a presence that remains patient, watchful, and endlessly enigmatic. They encounter a space where every sound, every movement, and every fleeting shape speaks to a presence that remains patient, watchful, and endlessly enigmatic. Speaks to a presence that remains patient, watchful, and endlessly enigmatic. Those who return from Misty Ridge Cabin rarely forget the experience. The memory of fog-laden trails, whispered voices, and fleeting figures persists, drawing them back in imagination to the high ridge, to the cabin, and to the spaces where the unseen continues to linger. Thank you for joining me tonight on this journey through 25 haunted mountain cabins in Colorado. The mountains are breathtaking by day, but at night, they are home to shadows, whispers, and restless spirits. Isolation and darkness make these cabins perfect for haunting, and some visitors never leave unchanged. If you ever find yourself alone in a remote cabin with no signal, remember the stories you heard tonight. Respect the spirits. Heed the shadows. And beware. For the mountains themselves seem to watch and wait. Sleep well tonight, if you can. If you can.